Veronica started a general cleaning in the country mansion where she and her husband lived. The work was in full swing. The woman switched on cheerful, dynamic music and singing along to the beat of the melody from the headphones, vacuumed. Then she decided to take out the rubbish. Suddenly she noticed something at the bottom of the basket. A bright spot attracted her attention, and her hand reached for the strange object. The woman pulled it out of the bin. It was a pregnancy test. A positive one. Veronica went into a stupor. She switched off the music and sat on the edge of the chair, looking at the test and swaying from side to side. There was only one thought pounding in my head. This is the end. The test is definitely not mine. So my husband has a mistress, and even pregnant. What a scoundrel. He forbade me to have a baby, but she can. Her whole life flashed before her eyes. Veronica lost her parents early. They were gone when the girl was only 3 years old. Since then, Veronica was taken by her grandmother Mary to her village and brought up on her own. Life in the village is not sugar. It was hard. We got up in the dark, went to bed late. The whole day in heavy labor and cares for the house and household. From childhood, Veronica loved medicine, treated animals, was kind and responsive. But when the girl turned 18, just before graduation, her grandmother died. She was ill for a long time and faded away like a candle. No matter how you look at it, the age was already advanced. A distant relative helped with the funeral. She advised Veronica to go to the city. She lived there herself. The woman mentored the girl. Wait, you with your medical school is no great joy. Injections to make and put drips. What's the most important thing for a girl? To marry well, then there's no need to work. Especially since you're so beautiful. Legs from your ears, doll's face, gorgeous hair down to your shoulder blades. Do you want me to help you meet a businessman? Come to our place and we'll invite him. He's about 15 years older than you. But that's okay. The main thing is that he has a lot of money. If he likes you, you'll live well. Veronica was in deep shock after her grandmother's death. How to live and what to do. She didn't know it all. So she just nodded in agreement, trusting Aunt Megan. After all, she was not a stranger. She wouldn't give bad advice. And so they did. Veronica came to visit her aunt. That same night, her husband's business partner, Stephen, was invited to a dinner party. The man was in his 30s. He was very good-looking, well-groomed, charismatic, handsome, knowing his price. Girls, especially young and inexperienced, Stephen simply adored. It was his weakness. Aunt Megan was well aware of this from her husband's stories. They decided to play on it. When they were introduced at the table, Stephen's eyes immediately lit up. Aunt Megan said, "Meet Stephen. This is Veronica, my great-niece, such a good girl from the village. Her grandmother raised her and now she's dead. She's all alone, an orphan, and she wants to go to medical school. I've come to visit. Veronica, this is Stephen, a very respected businessman, my husband Luca's partner. I hope you two can be friends. How about it? Let's raise our glasses and toast the meeting." Veronica said hello and blushed. The strange man was looking at her with such an expressive gaze, and Stephen was already mentally doing with Veronica everything that could and could not be done. He liked the girl immensely. Everything he liked: plump, sensual lips, beautiful eyes, slender, long-legged, and obviously not at all experienced in lovemaking. Blood and milk. What else can I say? You don't see much of that in the capital these days. Stephen courted Veronica all evening, made subtle hints and compliments, and asked her for her phone number. That's how they started dating. The man would have liked to pounce on the girl right away, but Veronica was completely inexperienced, and at the slightest attempt to get under her blouse or skirt pushed the bill away and began to cry. Say, "I'm afraid," and that's it. Not only that, Megan sternly warned Stephen. If you like her, get married. The girl is a good, hard-working, malleable, ideal wife, and don't you dare spoil your niece just like that. A relative after all. So Stephen made up his mind. Why don't we really get married? How many women can you change like a glove? With such a pretty girl, you can show up in high society without shame, he thought. A month later, a lavish wedding took place. For Veronica, it was all so unexpected, and her opinion was not really asked. Megan and Stephen were clearly in charge of everything. She talked nonstop. "Here, Veronica, you'll thank me for the rest of your life. What kind of fiancé did I introduce you to? Now, don't let it go to your head. Obey your husband. Do everything he wants you to do. Do your best, and consider your whole life in chocolate." And confused Veronica did not know whether she really loved Stephen or not. Too little time had passed. Yes, she certainly liked him. He was clever, gallant. But she was, frankly, a little afraid of him. How will things work out? Will they get along at home? How will their wedding night go? The girl felt like a student before the most important, serious exam. Stephen shone, accepted congratulations, and did not leave his princess a step. He was literally counting the minutes until the end of the ceremony called wedding to finally get what he dreamed of, the innocence of his wife. And now, finally, it's just the two of them in the mansion. Veronica is so beautiful and fresh. Stephen eagerly untied the tight corset and helped her remove her wedding dress. He admired his wife's form and figure. Now she belonged only to him. The thought of it made him hotter than ever. Veronica was shaking like a fever. Several feelings were struggling in her at once: desire, fear, shame, all mixed together. Her fears had been in vain. Stephen was a skillful and very sensitive lover, and their first intimacy had been wonderful. Stephen was passionate and tender at the same time. He whispered such words about love, called her happiness and sunshine. For the first 6 months, they had a complete idyll. Veronica took care of the house and the household. She waited faithfully for her husband from work, and Stephen flew home as if on wings. The woman felt that she was loved and desired. However, soon the man got bored with the young girl's body. He was saturated with it to the full, and he again wanted novelty, the sharpness of sensations. Veronica was a really good hostess, had a kind character. She tried not to scandalize and smooth out conflicts, fulfilling all the whims of her eternally dissatisfied husband. But every year the situation only worsened. The most acute scandals and clashes between them arose on the basis of children. Veronica strongly wanted to become a mother, and this is normal for any woman. However, Stephen was adamant in this matter and kept saying the same thing. "It's early yet. What's the hurry? I'm all business and work. You see, I come all exhausted, and there will be screams, squeals, nappies. What's the rush? You've got your whole life ahead of you. You better relax me. A massage like I like. Come to me, my joy." Veronica cried, resentful, but there was nothing she could do. So she drank those hated contraceptive pills, secretly dreaming that soon Stephen would change his mind, and they would become parents after all. But the years went by. She and Stephen grew further and further apart, and there were no children in sight. Recently, Veronica couldn't take it anymore and decided to have a serious conversation. "Stephen, I can't go on like this. If you do not want me to give birth, let's take a child from the orphanage. How many abandoned and destitute kids are there? Let's go. Tomorrow we'll go and see. But I'm begging you, don't you understand? I'm suffering. I feel bad that I can't be a mum." The man gritted his teeth as if from a toothache, thinking to himself, "What a nuisance. One idea is more delusional than the other. I can't believe she'd think of such a thing." But he said aloud, "Not tomorrow. Sorry, dear. I have an unscheduled business trip. Just one day. Leaving in the morning. Pack me everything as usual. We'll come back to this matter later." Veronica couldn't stand it and cried, "But why do you always avoid answering? Stephen, don't you realize that we've become like strangers? Everyone has their own life, and still no children. Don't you understand? A baby will bring us back together. I'm looking forward to being a mum. You're just selfish and stale and dry." Stephen, too, had taken on an elevated tone. "What are you missing? I took you in because your aunt asked me to. You live like a queen on your own. You go to exhibitions, charity events, salons, and something else. Well, I don't want kids. Is that a crime? That's it. This conversation is closed." The man left, slamming the door so that it almost flew out, and Veronica cried for a long time from resentment and injustice. But today she found that unfortunate pregnancy test. It turns out that from his wife, Stephen categorically does not want children, and on the side is having an affair, and they're ready to become a father. How can that be? Veronica began to remember the details of their family life recently. Stephen was indeed coming home late more and more often. She found other women's hair on his clothes, and sometimes he smelled of alcohol. But most importantly, the intimacy between them had almost completely disappeared. There was no trace of his tenderness and passion. Now it was just conjugal duty on an ad hoc basis. Veronica couldn't stand it and called her best friend Annie and, sobbing, told her everything. She listened attentively, without interrupting, and then answered, "Listen, Veronica, you say Stephen is leaving tomorrow morning. So take a taxi, follow him, see where he's going. Is he really going to the station or not? You'll find out. In the meantime, let's pretend you don't know anything. Be patient. We still need proof. Why would he want a scandal now? So what? He'll start to deny it." Veronica decided to do just that. She got up with her husband early in the morning, prepared coffee and sandwiches for the road, kissed him tenderly on the cheek, and was ready herself. A taxi was waiting for her around the corner, just her husband out of the door, and she followed him. She paid the taxi driver immediately and generously, so he didn't ask any questions and deftly followed Stephen's car. What was her surprise when her husband turned to the flower shop instead of the railway station. 15 minutes later, he came out of there with a huge armful of beautiful flowers, the same gorgeous bouquets he had once given her. Veronica felt a prick of jealousy right in her heart. More to come. The man stopped outside a 5-star hotel. Veronica was shaking. She got out and followed. In a broken voice, she asked the girl at the front desk, "Excuse me, which room did that respectable gentleman over there go to? I have important business with him. I have a letter to deliver." The girl smiled. "To Suite 20. He has booked it for 24 hours. There's a sultry hottie already waiting for the man there. Apparently a romantic date." "I don't want to bother you. You leave a letter and I'll pass it on when he comes out." The blood rushed to Veronica's head. She no longer heard the girl's last words and rushed out into the fresh air. She was just gasping for breath. That was all. There were no more doubts left. Tears rolled down the woman's cheeks. Why had she done this to her? Bastard, scumbag, she thought. Should I go back and make a scandal? No, I can't stand it. It would be unbearably painful to watch my husband having fun with his mistress, and it's all filthy dirty. So Veronica was left without children, without a husband, without education, and without a home. Veronica felt no one needed and completely alone. What to do? Where to run to? I don't want to see the scoundrel anymore. It turns out that Stephen only needed me for pleasure, and when he got bored, he found a new doll. And it's my own fault. I shouldn't have let my auntie get in my way. I should have gone to medical school. Now she'd have a profession. But what's wrong with that? I don't care. I'll go home to the village. It's all right. People live there somehow. Too, I won't be lost. I'd rather die of hard work. But I'll never go back to Stephen. The taxi driver, watching his passenger rushing back and forth, sobbing and clutching her head, understood, of course, everything at once. So her husband cheated after all. What did he miss? Such a beautiful woman, you can't take your eyes off her. He got out of the car, quietly approached the woman, touched her lightly on the sleeve. "Excuse me. Is there somewhere else I can take you, or am I free?" Veronica looked at him with eyes full of tears and nodded her head. "Yes, home now, back to where you picked me up, then to the station if that's okay. I'll pay for it. Only you'll have to wait a bit while I pack." The taxi driver sighed. "No need to pay extra. You've already given a lot. I understand, let's go." "Don't worry, everything that happens is for the best. Everything will work out. It happens so often in life. You think it's the end, and then it's funny after a while. The troubles that seemed insoluble at the time are really nothing." Veronica didn't seem to hear him, and just stared at one point, thinking about something of her own. She was in such shock and prostration that she was not thinking very well at all. The woman sobbed, frantically gathered her things in her suitcase and documents, wanted to leave a note to the scoundrel, but then changed her mind and hurried out of the mansion. She kept crying and could do nothing about it. At the railway station, she took a ticket for an electric train, sat in a half-empty carriage, and rolled to her village. Trees and houses flashed outside the window, as if saying goodbye to her. Veronica was scared and anxious, hurt by her husband's betrayal. She didn't know and didn't understand how and why she should go on living. The woman got out of the carriage and walked along the dusty, familiar from childhood country road for a long time. At last her native house appeared. What Veronica saw shocked her even more. During the 4 years of her absence after her grandmother's death, everything here had been in complete disrepair. The yard and vegetable garden were overgrown with weeds and wild bushes. The porch was completely ruined, and the dirty windows had long been unwashed, making a depressing impression. The woman could barely open the rusty padlock and went inside. Everything was the same as it had been when her grandmother was alive, only dust and cobwebs around a huge amount. Veronica sat down on the bed with the feather bed, on which she had slept so sweetly in her childhood, and cried again. Her arms were drooping, and she didn't want to live at all. She glanced at her grandmother's portrait on the wall. It seemed to her that she was looking at her with such a reproach, as in her childhood, when her granddaughter ambushed her of something bad. Her grandmother's gaze was literally saying, "Why are you sour? Don't give up. You need to work. Then and the bad thoughts in your head will not climb. Only lazy people lie down and suffer, and we country folk have no time for that." It was her grandmother's favorite saying, and Veronica became angry with herself. Why am I really like a fool, crying idly? There's so much work to do, and the woman got up and went to fetch water. I'll put the house in order, and then I'll cry further. The woman rolled up her sleeves and began to actively sort out, clean, and put things in order. The saddest thing was that the well in the yard was completely dry and shallow. Veronica had to fetch water from the river, and for drinking, even further away, from a spring. At the local village shop, she bought food for about a week and cooked dinner. She was so tired from the day that she fell into bed without eating. In the middle of the night, she was awakened by some screams coming from the yard. The woman was frightened, took a lantern, put on her jacket, crossed herself, and went to see what had happened. Someone was shouting from the well pit. "Help, help, somebody. I'm not getting out." The woman ran to the well pit and shone her light down there. At the bottom sat a frightened boy and a small kitten. Veronica shouted to him, "Oh my goodness. Baby, are you okay? How long have you been sitting there? And how did you even manage to fall into the pit?" The boy sobbed and shouted to her, "It's been 5 o'clock. I was on my way home and heard a kitten crying in your yard. So I couldn't resist. I went over the fence to look, and he fell into the hole and cried so pitifully. But I went after him. I thought I'd get out easily, but I didn't calculate my strength. I could still get to the middle, but beyond that I couldn't. There was nothing to hold on to. My hands are all scratched. What a brave man you are. Now be patient. I'll find a ladder and a rope." The woman let down a dilapidated wooden ladder she had found in the barn, and the boy quickly and deftly climbed out with the kitten. The sight was not for the faint-hearted. Both like chimney sweeps, dirty, stained, the kitten in the hands of the boy quieted down and stopped screaming. Veronica felt sorry for the poor creatures and commanded, "Well, come with me. I stoked the sauna today. It's still warm. Now I'll bring you my clean clothes and a towel and soap. Wash the kitten with soap and water in a basin. I'll wash your clothes and heat up dinner. I've only got potatoes and sausage. I won't let you go out for the night. I'll take you home in the morning, okay? My name is Veronica, by the way." The boy nodded his head and introduced himself in a businesslike manner, just like an adult. "I'm Thomas Everton. I live with my dad and stepmom on the outskirts of the village. Everyone knows me here. My dad was badly injured at work. He was crushed by a tree 6 months ago. My stepmother doesn't like us. When my dad was healthy, she was so fond of him. Of course, we have a big, nice house. Dad earned a lot. He was a woodsman. And when he became ill, my stepmother hardly lives with us. She disappears somewhere in the city 24 hours a day. She says she works in shifts. But I don't believe her. I won't leave my father. I do everything myself and look after him." After the bath, Veronica finally got a proper look at the guest. The boy was handsome, open, and smiling. Together they fed the kitten warm milk and named him Jim. Thomas was happy to eat too. It was obvious that the boy was very hungry, and everyone went to bed. Veronica got up early in the morning and started to work in the kitchen. Boiled semolina and made puffed pancakes, just like her grandmother had made. Thomas washed up immediately and came running at the smell. He praised Veronica. "Wow, only my mom used to make them for me. When I was a kid, I've forgotten how good it is, and the porridge is great. Mummy, thank you. It was delicious." Veronica patted his hair. "Thank you, Thomas. I'll get some more breakfast for your daddy, as long as it's hot, and let's go feed him while you go get Jim." The boy stroked the sitting pet behind the ear and held him gently. "I will, of course. We have a big yard at home. There is enough space. I like animals very much, and so does Daddy. I feel so sorry for him. He screams so much in pain at night he can't do anything. He clenches his hands in pain. Maybe a kitten will cheer him up a little." Veronica and Thomas talked the whole way. She was so happy with this cheerful, grown-up, incredibly polite boy. How she wished she had a son like that, to take care of someone, to not feel alone. Thomas's house was large, well-built, obviously well-made. But when they went inside, Veronica was almost knocked off her feet by the smell of a bedridden patient. It was obvious that there had been no female supervision for a long time. Things were scattered here and there, dust and dirt everywhere. Thomas took her to her father's bedroom. The picture she saw struck her to the core. In bed lay a thin, haggard young man. He hadn't had a haircut in a long time. He was unshaven, and the bed had obviously not been changed for many months. When he saw such a beautiful woman in front of him, he was embarrassed. "Hello, do I know you? I'm sorry it's not tidy. I'm sick. I can't get up at all. I'm chained to this wretched bed. My son is still young. He helps as much as he can, but he's only 9 years old. I wish I could die sooner. And not to torture myself and my son. I have no strength at all." Veronica opened the window, shaking the dusty curtains. "It's nothing. I just moved to the village yesterday. I haven't been here in 4 years. You should see what goes on in my house, even though I was born and raised here. But I don't remember you for some reason. My name's Veronica Jackson, but that doesn't help. And who are you, man? And where are you from? I'm Nicholas Everton. I'm an orphan myself. I grew up in an orphanage. My carers told me my roots were in this village, so I came here. I got a job in the forestry department, built the house myself with these hands. I married Vanessa. I loved her very much. I met her at a dance at the village club. She's so clever. She was a clean housekeeper. My house shone with her. We kept a vegetable garden, a small farm for ourselves. We had a little boy. But my wife had severe complications after the birth. She was treated for a long time. But when Thomas was 5 years old, she died. The doctors in the village let her down, and she had cancer. They didn't spot it in time, and that was it. I grieved so much in this world. My son was the only thing that kept me going. I didn't break down for his sake. I didn't start drinking. I wanted to. I only got drunk once after Vanessa's funeral, and then I woke up in the morning. My head was cracking. My son was crying hungry, calling for his mom. So I made a promise to myself, not a drop. So we started living together. A year ago, I met Chloe when I was traveling to the city on business. We bumped into each other in a shop. That's how we met. I told her everything about my wife and my son. She said she liked to live in the country. She moved in with us. But things didn't go well with Thomas. Her son didn't like her, that's all. I was angry with him. At first, I thought he was trying to break us up on purpose, jealous, and only now I realize he was right. While I was earning a lot, she was hanging around me, changing outfits one after another. She didn't want to keep a household. The vegetable garden was all on me too, and her manicure, you see, would go bad. But I loved her dearly and forgave her everything just to have her around. And when a huge tree crushed me at work, and I became an invalid, she was blown away. Everything in town is gone. Comes back once a week to change things. She turns her nose round and round, doesn't look at me, like I'm nothing. He says he's on a job, but there's no her, no money. Only fairy tales, I see. Who needs a bedridden man with a son in his arms? Veronica unwrapped the foil with the food she had brought and sat down on a chair nearby. Yes, your situation is really critical. It couldn't be worse. I can't believe a little kid can handle everything. I don't know how to go on living either. I lived with a rich husband for 4 years. He wouldn't let me have kids. The day before yesterday, I found out that he has a mistress, and she's pregnant. So I decided to go back to the country, to my homeland. You know what, Nicholas? Can I do a little neighborly help? Cook dinner, clean up a bit, look after you. I don't be shy. I'm almost a medical man, but I'm not a medical man. You have your breakfast. I've made some semolina porridge and pancakes. I hope you like it. Let me help you sit up a little more comfortably. Yeah, that's it. And we'll put a pillow under your back. Your Thomas rescued a kitten from an empty well yesterday and came into my yard to get it. That's how we met. He's a good kid, kind, loves animals. And after what I've learnt about you, he's a real hero in my eyes. Veronica, without waiting for an answer, called out to Thomas. Kid, I need your help. You're the boss. Bring a bucket, Rags. Show me where you have a basin, a clean towel, bed linen. In general, help me. We'll clean up your place today. Thomas was glad that Veronica was staying with them for the time being, and gladly began to help her. The two of them cleaned, cooked soup and baked a fish pie, and looked after Nicholas. Veronica washed him, gave him a mirror, and he shaved under her pressure, and she cut his hair with a machine. They changed his bed. The man was terribly embarrassed. He was very ashamed that such a beautiful woman was courting him, and his clothes off somewhere having fun. A disgrace. Towards evening, Veronica started to go home. She said to Nicholas, "You need, firstly, to see an experienced doctor in the capital, and secondly, get you a wheelchair. That way you can at least walk and do some chores around the house. You're really heroes for enduring all this lying in bed. It's crazy. I'll help you. I'll go into town tomorrow. I know someone at the World of Hope Charitable Foundation. Give me copies of your diagnosis and documents. I'll try to get you some help. In the meantime, I'll buy at least a simple wheelchair." Nicholas was almost in tears. "Thank you, Veronica. I can't believe that a stranger wants to help just like that from the bottom of his heart. Tell me, why would you do that?" But you know how many neighbors said at first, "Hang on, Nicholas. We're not going to leave you. In the end, it's only Aunt Scarlett who comes round once every couple of weeks to bring a bowl of soup from the stove. That's all the help we need." Veronica answered quietly, "You see, Nicholas, it's very important for me to take care of someone right now. And you and Thomas are very nice and sympathetic to me, so let me do it. I can't sit alone in four walls. When I think of my husband cheating on me, I want to cry. Veronica phoned the founders of the foundation and arranged a meeting for tomorrow. In the morning, she went to the city. She had nowhere to stay but in Stephen's mansion. After all, Veronica decided, I'm not divorced from my husband yet, so I have a legal right to be here. She was just entering when Stephen's car pulled into the yard. He got out, then opened the door and held out his hand to a beautiful brunette woman. Veronica took one look at her and nearly fainted. That's Nicholas's flatmate. They have a lot of common photos on their wall. The husband, seeing his wife, also almost lost the power of speech. After all, he was not at all upset that she disappeared somewhere. Stephen tried and now tried to get out of it. Veronica, where the hell have you been? I call you, you don't answer the phone. What do you mean? The woman only grinned and replied, looking him straight in the eye. Stephen, stop playing comedy. I knew everything. I saw you at the hotel and I found the pregnancy test too. So don't try to play the abused spouse. We're getting a divorce, full stop. By law, all property acquired is divided in half. I don't want your house or your cars. Just pay me what I tell you, and we'll say goodbye and live happily ever after. Aren't you, madam, ashamed to leave your bedroom lover and have an affair on the side? Veronica turned to Chloe. Chloe turned pale and changed in her face. So you know that? How? Who are you to tell me how to live my life? I'm still a young, beautiful woman, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life with an invalid. Veronica quietly replied, more than clear. Let it be on your conscience. Everyone will be rewarded for his actions. It is not for me to judge, but you know you are both scoundrels. Good day to you. Stephen took out his wallet, slipped his wife a wad of money, saying, That'll do it. The wife replied, That's enough. Just so you know, I don't need the money at all. It's for a very nice man who's been dumped by your new girlfriend. So think about it. If you get sick, she'll step over you too. Chloe started shouting and insulting Veronica and threw an ugly tantrum. Veronica ran outside and began frantically dialing for a taxi. She was shaking. It was so nasty and disgusting on her soul. Poor Nicholas. That's the worst of all. He's got such a snake on his chest. We must help him at all costs. And I feel sorry for Thomas. How does he cope with all this? At 9 years old. The first thing the woman did was to go to the charity and leave all the coordinates and copies of Nicholas's documents for help. Then she bought a good wheelchair, a lot of food, necessary medicines and hygiene products for care. I didn't forget about Thomas. She picked up some new clothes for him, because he looked like a ragamuffin, and some toys and books. Veronica went straight to Nicholas' house. When Thomas saw her, he was very happy to see her and hugged her. He looked into her eyes and asked her, Veronica, are you coming to visit us or for good? Stay here. I feel so good with you. I'll help you with everything. Honestly, I'll stop being naughty. Just don't leave me and Daddy like Chloe did, please. He's come round a bit since you've been here. He's smiling. Tears came to Veronica's eyes and she stroked the boy. Don't be afraid, Thomas. I won't betray or abandon you, and I will help your daddy for sure. You'll see, he'll get back on his feet. You have to believe that. When Nicholas saw Veronica, he glowed, brightening up. Veronica, good afternoon. I'm so glad you've come to see us again. I thought you had forgotten all about us. Wow, is that a wheelchair for me? Oh my God, it costs so much money. I looked it up online. I can't give it to you yet. The woman smiled. Nicholas, I don't have to give anything away. I'm doing this from the heart, from the bottom of my heart. So don't insult me. Come on, let's try to move over. Thomas, go help. Together they put Nicholas in the pram and Veronica took him out into the yard. The man just sobbed with happiness, for he had never left his room or his bed since his injury. Nicholas enjoyed breathing in the fresh air, looking at the green trees and singing birds, and for the first time he felt like living again. Veronica saw how happy he was and began to walk around the yard with him, showing him what she was talking about. You see, we need to make a new bench and trim the bushes. Look, the first daffodils have bloomed really beautiful. I've loved them since childhood. From now on, I'll walk with you every day. Tomorrow we'll go to the river, to the spring. It's so nice and peaceful there. Now I'm going to cook dinner, and then we'll eat, and I'll give you a massage. I bought some ointments, medicinal painkillers. You need to get your muscles moving. You've been sitting so long. Hopefully the pain will go away a little after this. You can't keep swallowing such strong painkillers all the time. Nicholas couldn't hold back the tears. They rolled from his eyes and pained down his cheeks in spite of his will. He wiped them away with his sleeve and whispered, "Veronica, stay here to live. You as a good fairy broke into my gray, joyless everyday life and painted the life of a helpless invalid in bright colors. And I never want to see Chloe again. If she dares to come here, I'll throw her out." The woman replied quietly, "Don't worry, Chloe won't come here again. I saw her yesterday. It's a small world. You wouldn't believe it. She is my husband's pregnant lover. Can you imagine that? That's the kind of money she makes in the city. That must be painful for you to hear. You still love her. We're both victims in this situation." Nicholas sighed and replied seriously, "No, Veronica. I was even relieved. Chloe and I were never really close souls. All she was interested in was my money. Thomas is smarter than me. He realized that a lot sooner. And you're a soulmate of mine. You know, I feel like I've known you for ages. I like you a lot, honestly. But I realize it's not easy living with an invalid, and I'm afraid that you'll get bored of it all quickly. And you'll only suffer with me, suffer with regret that we met. You're beautiful. You could easily find yourself a normal guy, have a baby. But I'm not capable of that either. After the operation, the doctors gave their verdict. I'm infertile. Something went wrong when my spine was damaged." Veronica abruptly turned the pram round and looked him straight in the eye. "Nicholas, remember, you're not disabled. Stop saying that. I believe that together we will overcome your illness and you will get back on your feet. But you have to want it first. I don't care if you're in a wheelchair or on your feet. You and Thomas are the closest people to me right now, and I'm not Chloe. I won't betray you. Or do you understand? God knows if we're going to have kids or not. They are not born on a whim. Let me just be there for you and don't try to calculate everything 100 years ahead." The man took her hand and held it in his for a long time, savoring the warmth and softness of his own palm. From that day on, Veronica, Nicholas and Thomas began to live together. The woman worked like a squirrel in a wheel. Thomas helped her with everything. And after a couple of months, the house and garden were unrecognizable. Everything was tidy, smooth beds, cleanliness and order. Thomas was transformed too. Now he was a well-groomed, normally dressed boy, like everyone else. When Veronica took Nicholas for a walk to the river or to the woods every day, the neighbors only twisted their heads and judged. "That's abnormal, so young, beautiful. Why does she need such a burden? She's Mary's granddaughter, the deceased. She traded a rich man's good life for this infirm invalid. What is it with people's heads? Nicholas isn't a bad bloke. He's a good housekeeper. But to live with a wheelchair user, it's such a torment." His previous partner couldn't stand it. She ran away quickly. Only she was seen. Soon, and Veronica will be tired of playing the Good Samaritan, and Thomas Trailer in addition, judged the neighbors. It was only old Michael who sharply put them off. "Why are you so angry, ladies? We are all under God. Trouble can knock on everyone's door. So now the guy should rot alive. Look at the way she's looking at him, and how he holds her hand. Yeah, it's love between them, you can tell. Ugh, you stupid chickens. They don't want to help, so they wash their bones every day." The old man began to visit Nicholas in a neighborly way, took up with him to rebuild the porch, to clean the stoves. The men began to socialize. Veronica was only happy about it. She welcomed the pensioner with tea and cakes, and was always happy to see him. After all, the more Nicholas will communicate, the less he closes up and slowly opens up to people. The old man sincerely admired the resilience and courage of the young woman who so selflessly cared for Nicholas. Only a few are capable of such a thing. From the charitable foundation came a reply. Nicholas's documents were sent to foreign clinics. And in Germany, Professor Stolz promised to take on his difficult case. But the sum for the operation and rehabilitation was fantastic. The foundation started to collect funds, but things were moving slowly. So Veronica decided to encourage Nicholas to get involved. He would be busy at the same time. He would have no time to be sad. The woman saw that the guy really had golden hands. He worked well with wood, carved beautifully. So she suggested, "Listen, Nicholas, try to make some boxes in your workshop. Get Thomas involved. And I'll take them when I go to sell eggs and vegetables." That way, little by little, more money would come in. Nicholas got excited about the idea. He felt much better. Normal nutrition, training, massages relieved his condition, and his back didn't hurt so much he could tolerate it. Nicholas had a real talent. All the souvenirs came out so unusual and stunningly beautiful that they were bought very willingly, and the time did not drag, but flew, and life no longer seemed so dreary to the guy. For the sake of his Veronica, Nicholas was ready for anything. only if she smiled and was always near. She was for Nicholas an inspiration, a stimulus for life. In addition, despite the disease, the young people became close, and now all the nights spent together. And Veronica often caught herself thinking that those 4 years of life with Snob Stephen were lived in vain. Such unity of souls, as with Nicholas she and Stephen had not even close. The young understood each other not only from half a word, but from a single glance. They were happy together. That was all. A few more months passed, and suddenly one day there was a persistent knock on Nicholas's wicket. It was early morning. Veronica woke up, kissed Nicholas, and said grudgingly, "Who is it at this early hour? I'll go and open the door. Maybe they've brought milk." Sleepy Veronica threw on her dressing gown and went to open the door. On the doorstep stood Michael, excited to the limit, and with him an elderly couple, a man and a woman of obvious balsamic age, but dressed very expensive and tasteful. And not everyone, even a very wealthy person, had a Ferrari car of the latest model. The old man neighbor started the first conversation. "Good morning, Veronica. I brought you some guests. They've been traveling around the village, asking about the orphan man. I didn't realize it at first. Then I suddenly remembered that Nicholas was an orphan, brought up in an orphanage." Surprised Veronica invited the guests into the house and began to ask what was going on. "My name is Veronica, and my husband's name is Nicholas. He will tell you everything now. I don't know the details of his childhood. Wait a minute, I'll help him get dressed. Thomas, my son, come here and offer the guests some tea and warm up the cheesecakes." The nimble boy immediately orientated himself and began to chat with the elderly people. Veronica went to Nicholas. "Honey, you have visitors. Let's get dressed. Come and meet them." A man and a woman in their 70s. They look very rich. They're looking for a man your age, an orphan. Nicholas was puzzled. "What's that got to do with me? There aren't many of them in the world. No peace in your own house. We wanted to stay in bed a little longer tonight." Veronica smiled and kissed Nicholas on the cheek. "Well, don't pretend. I know how much you don't like socializing because of your illness, but since people have come from far away, give them your attention. It would simply be rude to ask them to leave. You need to listen to them." She helped him into a wheelchair and took him into the kitchen. Thomas was already chatting away and telling the guests how he had rescued the kitten from the well. They were only surprised. Seeing Nicholas, the old woman said, "Hello, are you Nicholas? We need to talk to you. My name is Jessica and this is my husband Harry. We're about to ask you a question. Do you happen to have a butterfly-shaped mole on your left shoulder? It's very important." Surprised, Nicholas silently took off his shirt and showed his mole. It was indeed quite unusually shaped. It was rare to see such a thing. Seeing the mole, the woman shrieked and suddenly fainted right on the floor. Veronica was frightened and rushed to her guest. She splashed water on her and waved a towel at her. A commotion began. Finally, the woman came to her senses and immediately cried. Through her sobs, one could only make out, "My son Nicholas. We found you, Harry. We did it. Our Nicholas is here." Nicholas didn't understand a thing. Veronica dripped Valacordine into a glass of water and gave the poor woman a drink. While she came to her senses, Harry began the story. "Listen to us, please, and you will understand, though I still don't believe it myself. My wife and I have been together all our lives since we were students. We started our first business together. We opened our own mini pizzeria. We baked our own pizzas, brought in food. My wife was a saleswoman. And then we hired people, expanded and opened another one, and another. Over all these years, we have a long-established network of pizzerias Italiano. I think it is superfluous to explain how much time, nerves, money, and life was spent on all this. That's why we deliberately decided not to have children at first. We didn't have time for that. We came to our senses only when both of them turned 35. But it turns out that children do not appear at the snap of a finger. How many clinics did we go to? We were desperate when Jessica finally miraculously got pregnant. How happy were we? Words can't describe it. I took care of her, kept her busy. All she did was shop, go to the wholesalers and monitor the process. The pregnancy was difficult. The birth was difficult too, a little premature. Then Nicholas was born. At first he was so weak. He was sick for a long time. We were so worried about him. And when he was 6 months old, my wife went for a routine checkup in a private children's polyclinic. As luck would have it, I was on a business trip to meet business partners. My wife has her own car. She's an excellent driver. Nicholas was in a child seat. Nothing to portend trouble that day. But it was winter. And SUV pulled out into the oncoming lane and spun sharply to the left. and in an instant, it was in front of Jessica's car. The wife had literally a split second to get out of the collision and into the ditch. Her car went off the side of the road and flipped several times. Jessica continued the story. She had already regained consciousness. I hit my head pretty hard. I don't remember anything. It was passing motorists who saw the tragedy and called an ambulance, and I regained consciousness and then I blacked out again. I finally came to my senses only after the operation, 24 hours later. The first thing I asked, or rather screamed, "Where's my son Nicholas? Did you find him?" But everyone just threw up their hands. They couldn't find the baby or the baby seat. No matter how many times we searched, it was all in vain. All the connections my husband made, but no results. The police closed the case. They said the child would not have survived in such cold weather. He probably died and the body in the chair fell into the river. The accident happened near the bridge. I spent a long time in a neurological clinic. I thought I'd never make it. I didn't want to live at all. We tried to get pregnant many times after that, but to no avail. God never gave us any more children. Harry saw my pain and offered to adopt a baby. But for some reason, I couldn't accept that my son was dead. Here, in my heart of hearts, I hoped that maybe he had survived. Maybe someone picked him up. I got involved in charity work. We've been helping the homeless and needy for years. We feed them in a special canteen, treat them for free, bring them clothes. Don't let them die. You know how many of them turn out to be maimed fates. They were even candidates of science. Just one day, some tragedy crippled a man, and there was no one to help him. So he went downhill, started drinking, and hit rock bottom. So recently we were treating a homeless man for a sheepdog bite. We got to talking. His name's Stephen. And he suddenly started telling this amazing story that 28 years ago, he did a good deed. He saved a dying baby. It turns out that the night I had the accident, he was wandering near the workplace, where people often leave bottles and food. He heard a faint squeak in the snow. He thought he heard it, or it was animals, which it is a baby lying in a child's chair, lying next to it. Stephen didn't hesitate, shoved it under his jacket closer to his body, and ran faster than the wind to the shelter. He put it on the porch and started pounding on the door. When he saw someone coming, he ran away, didn't want any trouble with the police. He'd been beaten up by them more than once. We couldn't believe our ears. We went to that orphanage. Thank God the manager was still alive. We paid her very generously, and she agreed to dig through all the archives. That's how we found you, Nicholas. She said something like, after leaving the orphanage, rumor has it he went to the country cause they all thought you'd been dropped off by one of the local dysfunctional women. And so, little by little, they unraveled the tangle. Nicholas, I can't believe I'm seeing you in front of my eyes. Tell me about yourself. How did you grow up? What happened to you? Why are you in a pram? Nicholas was almost sobbing. He couldn't stand it any longer and clung to his father, then to his mother, and quietly whispered the one cherished word he had longed to utter all his childhood. Hello, Mummy. Veronica could not hold back her emotions and cried too. Thomas alone was perplexed. What's all this about, guys? Why are you crying? Everything is fine. I understand that I have a grandfather and a grandmother. That's great. I've been lucky lately. First, Veronica's mom turned up, then my grandparents. Nicholas calmed down, began to talk a little. I grew up in an orphanage for as long as I can remember. The nannies told me that I was dropped off on the porch as a baby. Other children sometimes had parents or relatives who came to visit. No one ever came to see me. I was especially sad and hurt on my birthday. I never celebrated it, never liked it. I kept resenting my parents mentally. I thought, what was the point of having a child if they abandoned me afterwards? Before I met my wife, I didn't have a normal life. All my childhood, like a wolf cub, I survived. Fought and fought for an extra ration of Extode. I never had enough bread. I came to the village, built a house, got married. Thomas was born. But my wife died of a long illness. And 6 months ago, I became an invalid too. A tree fell on me. My flatmates started disappearing. I'm bedridden. Poor Thomas was looking after me as best he could. But how much can a 9-year-old do? And then Veronica came into my worthless life. She was the one who made me love life again. Bought me a wheelchair. Gives me massages, exercises. Basically, we love each other. Thomas has a crush on her. He calls her mum. He loves her too. Veronica intervened. We're raising money for the operation. In Germany, Professor Stolz is ready to take care of Nicholas, but the sum is just huge, unaffordable. The charity fund and we ourselves are collecting a little bit, but so far we have only 1/3 of the money. But time is running out, the doctor said. If another 6 months go by, it's unlikely that anything can be done. We have to hurry. I'm so worried we might be too late. I believe Nicholas will get back on his feet and walk. We just have to raise the bloody money. But look at the lovely boxes he makes himself, and I sell," Veronica said. Harry took the souvenirs in his hands. "Beautiful indeed. You have golden hands, son. I will transfer the necessary amount for the operation today. Veronica, give me the clinic details and the doctor's coordinates. You two get ready for the road. I think the flight will be in a few days." Veronica was taken aback. "How the other day? We've just applied for a passport, and it's a 3-month wait. And what about Thomas? I won't leave Nicholas alone. I'll be with him 24/7. But there's no one to leave Thomas with either. He's only 9 years old." Jessica grinned. "And don't worry about Thomas, we'll babysit him. He'll be staying with Granny. Won't you, grandson? I think he'll like our mansion, and my husband will take care of the paperwork. Don't worry, he's got connections everywhere. It's just a small thing. The main thing is for you to get well, son. We don't spare any money for that." Nicholas clung to his mother again like a little child. "Thank you all, my family. 4 months ago I was just lying in bed. Nobody wanted me and I was rotting alive. And my poor son was tearing himself into 100 pieces to help me in any way he could. Honestly, the only thing I prayed to God for was to die soon and not suffer. I had no strength at all, and there was no help at all. And now I'm the happiest man on earth. I have a son, my beloved and most precious woman, and my father and mother. What more could I want? It feels like all my unfulfilled childhood dreams have come true at once. I still can't believe it." His father kept his word. A week later, Nicholas was operated on in Munich. Veronica sat next to him, literally never leaving his side. Even the staff were amazed at her resilience. She prayed day and night and whispered how much she loved Nicholas, giving him hope that he would get back on his feet. The worst part began when that moment of pain came. The muscles were strong, atrophied, and wouldn't obey. Every step was given through unbearable pain. Nicholas screamed, biting his fist until it bled, enduring. In moments of despair, he looked at his soulmate, and she whispered to him, "I'm proud of you and I love you. You can do anything. We'll waltz at the wedding. Come on, let's do it one more time." And he got up and walked again and again, until after 2 months of rehabilitation he finally stood on his feet and walked confidently, leaning only on an elegant cane. On their return, Mom, Dad, and a happy Thomas were waiting for them at the airport. He jumped on his neck, as he had done before, and literally hung on to him. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He whispered to his dad, "Daddy, I missed you and Mummy so much. It's so good to have you home already. Grandma and Grandpa are great. Can you believe it? I can play golf now. Grandpa says I'm good at putting balls in holes." Veronica hugged Thomas too. Veronica said, "I missed you too. I don't recognize you. You're such a fancy guy now. I see Grandma's been spoiling you. What's the phone number?" After that, Nicholas hugged his mum and dad for a long time and kept thanking them for their help. Jessica said, "Why are we standing here for so long gathering gawkers? I've prepared everything at home. Set the table. Let's all come to our place. Do you mind, young people? What are you going to do in the country? Nicholas can't carry any weights for a while. We're in the country. All the blessings of civilization. The house is huge. We'll all have our own room with a balcony. And if you don't want to live with us old people, we can buy you a flat in a dormitory neighborhood. You decide for yourself." Nicholas and Veronica replied without collusion, "We'd love to live together. We'll get to know each other, and then we'll see." Nicholas was amazed by the beauty and luxury of the apartment. Veronica was used to such things, having lived in luxury with Stephen for 4 years. They sat down to dinner together. Jessica had done her best. There were all sorts of treats. Then Mom began to show Nicholas pictures of his childhood. She was crying and remembering. "Here, sweetie, this is you just born. The discharge from the maternity hospital. Your father is so happy, holding you in his arms. That's us bathing you. You were so thin, just like a little boy. You loved the water so much. You'd close your eyes and doze off. And we admire you." Then the woman went into the wardrobe and pulled out a whole pile of baby clothes. She went through them and cried again. I could never throw them away. I couldn't lift my hand. I'd hold a jumpsuit against me and I'd think it smelt like my son. Harry's swearing, he's not picking up the phone. It was like an outlet for me. But crying seemed to make me feel better. She hugged Nicholas again. "I'm so glad we're together now. and I'm not afraid to die. I'm just barely used to calling you Nicholas. In my mind, you're Kevin, that's all. A month passed. Nicholas began to get into his father's business and adopt the basics of his business. He had already dreamed of retiring from business, and now he had an heir to entrust it all to. And Veronica finally took on Thomas's education. They read a lot, learnt maths. The boy turned out to be very clever. Although no one had studied with him for a long time, he grasped everything on the fly. He was placed in a private elite school with an in-depth study of foreign languages. English came surprisingly easily. Veronica began to notice some movements in her stomach. The movements were incomprehensible, and she wanted to eat all the time. The woman decided to check with a doctor. Jessica made an appointment with her trusted doctor and went with her son's fiancé for support. When Veronica got dressed after the examination, the amazed gynecologist even took off her glasses. She pronounced, I'm shocked. It's the 21st century. My dear, do you really not understand what is happening to you? How can you be so careless about your health? Veronica remained silent in surprise, assuming the worst, and Jessica asked, Well, what is it? Anything serious? Did you miss something? The doctor laughed. The woman is 16 weeks pregnant. The baby is already moving safely. She doesn't know what's going on. Are you not going to see us? Are you coming straight to labor? Veronica couldn't believe it. I started eating so much, so I've been, She was saving her fiancé, all nervous. I spent 2 months with him in a clinic in Germany, but my cycle was off. I knew that, but I thought it was stress. But there were no signs at all, no nausea, nothing. Oh my God, is it really true? Nicholas is going to be so happy. I mean, we've always dreamed of having children. I thought it was impossible because of his illness. And now it's a miracle. It's a miracle. Veronica had an ultrasound and it showed that she was expecting a boy. Jessica secretly wiped away tears of happiness. There it was, another grandchild on the doorstep. In the evening, when Nicholas and Harry returned home, Veronica couldn't stand it and handed him the ultrasound picture. The man twirled it this way and that. What is it? I don't understand, he said. Veronica laughed. Your son, can't you see? There's the head, the nose, the arms, the legs. Nicholas looked at her dumbfounded. What son? The doctors told me then, after the operation, that the childbearing function is impaired. I am now infertile. Veronica only waved her hands. Well, I don't know. You know better, Daddy. But are you happy at least? Thomas, you're going to have a little brother. The boy immediately shouted, Hurrah, and ran to his grandfather to tell him the incredible news. Nicholas stood there like a statue. He kept looking at the ultrasound and smiled blissfully. Finally, he hugged Veronica, stroked her tummy and whispered, Now I know for sure. Miracles happen. We're going to have a baby boy. Veronica, we have to get married right away. The baby must have a father. And you're already my wife. Only now we're making it official. So marry me. Veronica laughed. I'd love to. But just when I think that I'm going to have to go through divorce proceedings with the scoundrel Stephen, I don't want to see him. Do you believe me? Nicholas promised her. I'll talk to Father. I think he'll sort it out quickly, without your involvement. And you can have no doubts about me. You are my muse, my ray of light, my ideal, and I will never betray you or trade you for anyone. I don't care what you become, what you look like. I love you with all my heart, and I don't need anyone else. Veronica pressed herself gently against Nicholas. At that moment, she was completely happy and knew that he would be her support and encouragement for the rest of her life. She wasn't angry with Stephen at all now. In fact, she was even grateful to him for that betrayal. Otherwise, she would never have met Nicholas and would never have become a mum. And then she suddenly remembered the words of that unfamiliar taxi driver. It was just as if he'd said, all things work out for the best. Arriving at his ex-wife's house a year after the divorce, her husband froze upon learning of her fate. Amanda ran to the kitchen sink and splashed the coffee she had just drunk from a cup. Catherine is messing with me again, the woman thought with anger and despair. Stop hitting her with a belt, Amanda said out loud. She had woken up this morning in a good mood for once. It was Saturday, the whole weekend was ahead of her. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering lazily where the sun bunny had come from. She didn't immediately realize that it was a mirror lying on her bedside table, on which the rays were falling. How quiet is the house? Amanda wondered. It was 10 o'clock. John and Catherine should have been up by now. She planned to go to the mall and buy herself the pants she'd been eyeing on the store's website for a while, and pick up some clothes for her stepdaughter. Afterward, she and her husband could spend the day together. Amanda turned on her side and saw a note from her husband gone on business. Urgently summoned. But John won't know when he'll be back, she thought. Why does he have to be the one to be pulled on weekends? If the boss himself had traveled like this, he would not have sent others. Her husband was the deputy head of a large construction firm. He often personally traveled to the sites, including on weekends. This dampened Amanda's mood a little, but she tried not to give in to sadness. The woman threw a robe over her nightgown and went down to the first floor. In the kitchen, she boiled water in an electric kettle, poured ground coffee into a cup, and poured boiling water over it. John wouldn't fail to remind me that there's a coffee machine in the house, Amanda smiled. But it was nice to be able to make coffee the old-fashioned way, like when I was a student. She covered the cup with a saucer and went to the bathroom to wash up. Amanda decided to take a shower and stood under the cool jets for about 10 minutes. Then she returned to the kitchen, looked out the window and smiled at the sunny summer day that promised only good things. But it was a sip of coffee that ruined everything. Apparently, while I was in the bathroom, Catherine came into the kitchen and put something in the drink. Amanda pondered. What kind of nasty stuff did she find? Was it black pepper or Brooklyn? She had no desire to taste the liquid a second time. She emptied the cup into the sink and sighed. Her mood was hopelessly ruined. For the 6 years that Amanda had lived with John, she had tried to find common ground with Catherine, his daughter from her first marriage, but she had failed. And it all started with their very first meeting, when a man brought his then not yet wife, but the woman he loved, to introduce his 9-year-old daughter. I had one mom, and I do not need a new one, said the girl, turned around and went into the room. Will she get used to it? John then divorced his hands. It's been 3 years since Mary died. She misses her. You know, Amanda said. A child is attached to her mother, and I'm not her aunt yet. That's all right, her husband replied. But it didn't happen. When the woman offered to go with the girl to the children's park to spend time together and get acquainted, she seemed happy at first, but then throughout the walk was terribly cranky. I'm dizzy. I feel sick. I don't want to feed them, and I don't want to eat myself. I don't want ice cream either. She refused even her favorite treat. John and Amanda were a little confused by her behavior, so they came home and tried to have dinner together. My stomach hurts, Catherine said, and retreated to her room. So it went on. The girl perceived the new woman of the father exclusively in the bayonet. The man, on the contrary, only dreamed of meeting a new love after several years of lonely life after the death of his wife. So smart and beautiful, he said of Amanda. And they met in a public restroom at the train station. It's a shame to tell this story, the woman laughed later, recalling the situation. But she was not laughing then. In February, she came from her district center to the big city, where she found a job. The bus ride took her only 2 hours, so there were no sanitary stops. By the end of the trip, Amanda had a terrible urge to go to the bathroom. She jumped out of the vehicle and almost ran to the bus station building, but ran into a closed bathroom door. The restroom was closed for repairs, the note on it said. The nearest one was in the train station building. What the hell is this? The woman exclaimed in frustration. But there was no way out, and she hurried toward the train station, which was nearby. To get there, she had to pass through a small square, then go down into an underground passage, where people in a hurry were also pushing and literally stepping on each other's heels. God, couldn't the stations be connected somehow? Many people change from train to bus and vice versa, she muttered to herself. She was sweating in her down jacket from the fast walk. Strands of her brown hair were poking out from under her hat, and the suitcase she was dragging behind her looked like it was going to tear her arm off. Already barely tolerable, Amanda walked into the building and saw the huge lines. The women's restroom. And it's in a train station. However, the toilet is working. One of the people standing there was indignant. There were no people in front of the men's. Amanda, disregarding propriety, opened the door, saw a vacant stall, and ran in without thinking. The woman slammed the door shut behind her with a jerk and finally went to the bathroom. Ushish, she sighed in relief and smiled. That incredible feeling of relief. And then she saw that she hadn't closed the latch on the stall door. But it didn't matter, because luckily no one was trying to get in from the other side. The woman pushed the handle and pushed the door open to get out. But it wouldn't open. The handle didn't go all the way down. Amanda jerked on it some more, but to no avail. "What kind of bad luck is this?" she said aloud. "Madam?" came a voice from the next stall. A little surprised to hear that woman's voice. "But do you need help?" Very much, Amanda ventured, embarrassed. "I think the lock's jammed. The knob won't budge." Just a second, she heard the sound of water running from the stall. "Okay, now my hands are blistered. I'll think of a way to get you out." Amanda heard the sound of water running from the faucet, then the sound of a zipper being stretched, and then some rustling. "Found it," the man said cheerfully. He started picking something in the lock, and after a minute he swung the door open. "And here I am, saving the princess imprisoned in the tower," he joked, holding a screwdriver. "Yeah," Amanda smiled. "A good princess upset with the press in front of the toilet." "You're a fine lady." The man winked at her, and she admired his brown eyes. Dark-haired, handsome man. "Thank you," seriously, the woman said as she left the stall. "And I'm sorry to barge into the men's room, but I'll tell you the whole epic with the search for the restroom." "Can we go out of here?" the man suggested, "and continue our acquaintance over a cup of tea? My treat." "I agree," Amanda said. "Where can I get something to eat here? I don't know the city." "Let's go to a pancake house right here at the station," the man suggested. "My name is John, by the way." "Amanda," the woman replied. "I agree. The pancake house is good. Let's go before the next leg of the road." They went to the far end of the building, where a sign with the image of appetizing pancakes hung. Once inside, they placed their order. Amanda chose cheese pancakes, and John chose chicken pancakes, plus 2 cups of black tea. We sat down at a table while we waited. "Where are you from?" the man started the conversation. "On business or visiting? Is this your first time here?" "No, not for the first time. I've already come once for an interview. I'm from the district center. We don't have much work there. I found a vacancy here. I got hired, and I'm moving." Brevity is the sister of talent, John smiled. In a few sentences, they informed me of the events of the past few weeks. "And what do you do?" the woman asked. "Where did you get a screwdriver all of a sudden?" "I work in a construction company. Constantly on the road, inspects objects. I accidentally picked up a screwdriver at the construction site after checking the fasteners. I found it on the train, called my colleagues and told them that I would bring it back the next time I visited them." "It was a lucky coincidence for me," Amanda said. "I don't know how long I would have had to sit there if it hadn't been for you." "Oh, our order is ready." John got up and went and got it. "Voila." He put the tray on the table. "I'll pay for it. I insist," the woman said. "You have a lot of money you need for rent. You'll need it now." Keep it, and I won't have to rent a hostel. That's why I got this job. It pays well and I have a place to live. After all, a hostel is cheaper than an apartment. I see, the man replied. But still, I'm not used to paying for women. So I insist on treating you. All right, Amanda accepted. Where do you live? I'm in the suburbs. I own my own house. Built it a few years ago for my family. The woman blushed a little because she was starting to like this man. Are you married? Not anymore? No, he answered with restraint. My wife died, a transient cancer. My daughter is left behind. It's just the two of us. I'm sorry. My condolences, Amanda said sympathetically. How old is your daughter? She'll be 9 soon. She's my pride and joy. She's a good student. She plays sports. What kind of sports? I just got a job. State Athletics Training Center. She does skiing, plans to participate in races, but so far she's only enrolled in a sports school. Enrollment starts at age 9, but the coach was cooperative. Her daughter is a little younger, but they say she has abilities. Are you an athlete? What kind of sport do you do? I'm not. I take care of the athlete's health. I'm a nurse. Oh, how interesting. It's a bit of a catch-22, if you'll pardon the expression. I've been getting some injections lately. Don't think I'm sick. I just banged my elbow on a door jamb. Now it's a nerve problem. I can't feel my fingers. There's this nasty feeling that the whole nerve from elbow to hand is like a taut rope. Yeah, it's a minor injury, but it's a nasty one, Amanda agreed. Well, I do not want to go to the clinic for injections only to lose time in lines. So I was thinking of hiring a visiting nurse when I get back from my business trip. Maybe you'd be willing to help me out. Oh, I'd love a part-time job. But how would you get to the suburbs? There's a shuttle bus. If it's convenient for you, I'd rather invite you to our company's office. It's downtown. I'm just working all the time. My daughter is looked after by a governess and my mother-in-law. And me, staying late and at night, it would hardly be convenient for you to come to our house. It's a deal, Amanda said. I'll just check my schedule at the new place and contact you to discuss a convenient time. And for that we need to exchange phone numbers, the man smiled. Write mine down. That's how they began to communicate. And for 10 days, which lasted a course of prescribed injections, they became close. This was undoubtedly due to the daily contemplation of my naked heel, John joked. Yes, I appreciated your confidence, Amanda agreed. They began seeing each other on John's rare days off. His daughter Catherine was very unhappy with Amanda's appearance. Daddy, let's go out. I miss you so much. Why are you leaving home for that woman? The girl asked unhappily. Don't you love me anymore? Of course I do. I just want to take a little break from work and family matters and spend time with someone I like, the man said as affectionately as possible. You'll like her, you'll see. However, the girl took her father's new friend in stride. John and Amanda did not give up hope that the girl will eventually change her mind. But that didn't happen. After the first meeting and a trip to the park, they tried to go to the movies together, but Catherine again only frowned, showing that she was not interested in everything that was happening. You know what I suggest? John suddenly suggested to Amanda the next day. I think if we all live under the same roof, Catherine will realize that we're serious, and she'll soften up on you. I don't think it's time yet, Amanda shrugged. Maybe we should wait. Why wait until we're old? I want to live a full life with my family now, not put everything off for the future, the man insisted. The woman agreed, even though it seemed like a bad idea to her still only a few months after meeting him. She gave up her dorm room and moved in with John. Catherine took this fact with unexpected calm. A week later, Amanda realized why. "Honey, my childhood friend Charlie is coming to visit us on Sunday," John said on Friday. "He lives in another city and wants to show his fiancée his native New York. But he wants to meet my fiancée too." He hugged the woman and kissed her. "And I'm already in bride status," Amanda smiled as she returned the kiss and also hugged the man. "Of course, I'm an honest man and I always marry the ones I love," John jokingly assured her. "If that can be considered a proposal, then I'm in," Amanda said. "That's just in case," the man said affectionately. "We'll talk about it later." On Sunday, Amanda woke up early. She set the alarm clock for 8 because it was going to be an active day. She had to feed the guests breakfast after the road, then walk around the city, show the sights to Charlie's fiancée, and in the evening have dinner at a restaurant. Amanda really wanted to make a good impression on the people close to John. "Now we'll have a quick coffee," she thought as she looked at the sleeping John. "Then I'll do breakfast, and closer to their arrival I'll do my makeup and hair." With those thoughts, she stood up and reached for her glasses, which were on the nightstand. The woman had poor eyesight, so she wore contact lenses for work and other occasions when she left the house. At home, she wore glasses. Now Amanda was running her hand over the surface of the nightstand, trying to find the glasses, but it was as if they weren't there. "That's odd," the woman thought. "Maybe John moved them. But why? And I don't want to wake him up." She got up, bent over to the nightstand, trying to see what was on it, then squatted down and ran her hands across the floor, deciding that the glasses might have fallen there. Amanda then looked for them everywhere: on the nightstand at John's side, on the dressing table where her makeup was, and on the windowsill. But the glasses were nowhere to be found. "God, I threw away my contact lenses yesterday," remembered the woman. "How am I going to get ready for the guests? John was supposed to buy the lenses." Later in the morning, he was going to meet the guests at the train station and could stop at the optician's on the way. For now, without lenses or glasses, Amanda was effectively paralyzed. She couldn't cook, she couldn't clean the house. The feeling of helplessness made her cry. What happened? John woke up. Upon hearing what had happened, he said he would go get the lenses right away. John, at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning, where is the optician open? Amanda sighed. "I'll find out which store opens first," the man said soothingly. "In the meantime, you try to relax." Amanda went back to bed since she couldn't do anything anyway. John picked up his phone, went online, looked for the nearest optician open from 9 o'clock, and started to get ready to go. "Let's listen to some music," he said, handing Amanda a small player. "It helps me on business trips when I get tired of looking at my phone on the train." Amanda put on the headphones, turned on the player, and closed her eyes. John was right, the tunes distracted her, and it didn't seem so bad that she wouldn't have time to do her hair as she'd planned. The most important thing for her was to feed her guests. "I'll have to do without baking. I won't have time," she realized, and began to rethink the menu. Half an hour later, John returned. Amanda put on her lenses and finally went to wash her face and then to the kitchen. To her surprise, there on the windowsill were her glasses. "John, how did they get here?" she asked in amazement to the man who had entered next. "Did you leave them here?" He laughed. "You've ruined your own mood this morning. I'm sure I didn't put them here. Why would you? How would I have gotten to the bedroom without them?" "Well, maybe you're tired. Took them off, left them on." The man shrugged. But Amanda was sure she couldn't have done such a thing. She had a bad suspicion in her head that she decided not to voice for the time being. In a couple of hours, the guests were to arrive, and she didn't want to meet them with a scandal and without food, so she started cooking. The rest of the day went according to plan. John's friend and his fiancée arrived. Everyone liked each other and had a good time. Even Catherine, who had been taken for a walk around the city, seemed to be in a good mood. Maybe I'm imagining things for myself, thought Amanda, observing the girl's behavior. But after a few more days, she became convinced of what she already suspected. The child began to constantly do small nasty things to her, then hide something, then in the yogurt spilled cereal, then throws shoes. Amanda just kept quietly tidying up. After one of the first incidents, she tried to inform John about his daughter's antics, but the response was not what she had hoped for. "John, do you really believe I would do such a thing?" For some reason, Amanda led the man into the living room where her underwear was strewn across the couch and chairs. "Why would Catherine do such a thing?" he said indignantly. "Because she doesn't like me. This isn't the first time she's done something like this. Remember the stories about the glasses? I don't know why you're snapping at her. It can all be explained by your forgetfulness. I forgot that I left my underwear all over the room, but you what? Let's drop the subject," the man said irritably. "I love both you and my daughter, so try not to swear." "Nice touch," washed his hands of it, Amanda thought resentfully. "Okay, I'm not going to take revenge on the child, I'll be patient." It went on like that for about a year, until the family moved into a new big house. John insisted. "I want to see a new family nest in a new place," he told Amanda. "I was living with a different family in the old house after all. It's time for us to start our own. You and I have been putting off getting married. But I think we should get married, and the house is officially in your name." "You're a little emotional when you talk about such important steps, aren't you?" The woman was a little surprised. "Perhaps I'm afraid to jinx my happiness," the man smiled. "It hurts when you enjoy life, and it is like envy to you as a footstool. Like my first wife died, Catherine had just grown up. I got the job I have now, and everything was going so well. And then it all fell apart." "We'll be fine," Amanda said softly. They chose a house together. Catherine was excited about the move. "I'll have a big room," the girl rejoiced. "Yes, your current one in our old house will seem like a cubbyhole compared to it," John replied. "Let's go with your taste." Amanda decided to improve the opportune moment, as long as the girl was in a good mood. "Let's you be the one to choose our common house. Look where you like best, what room, what yard, and so on." "Okay," Catherine agreed cheerfully. John silently took Amanda's hand and discreetly stroked her fingers in appreciation. They found the house quickly enough. The two-story building was located in a quiet neighborhood. There was a small courtyard in front of the front door, and a large area at the back of the building where they could plant flower beds or vegetables. Trees were already growing there: fruit, apples, pears, ornamental, and birch trees. The whole family literally fell in love with this place, and the deal to buy it was done. A couple weeks later, they moved in and immediately put their old place on the market. "We'll use the money to go on a honeymoon," John said that evening at the first dinner in the new house. "And we're going to furnish the place to our liking. And we'll buy you a car, finally." "Thank you. I'm very happy right now," Amanda replied. "And I'm grateful that you've changed my life." "You changed mine," the man looked at her tenderly. Catherine, who was watching the scene, wrinkled her nose but said nothing. 6 months later, the couple played a wedding. There were few guests: John's father, his mother was dead, Amanda's parents, and a few of their closest friends. An unexpected guest was the man's former mother-in-law. He kept good relations with Anna Vitalievna and even decided to invite her to his new marriage. "God grant you a long life together," she sincerely wished him, raising her glass. Amanda looked at her gratefully, happy that this woman who had lost her daughter had found the strength to accept the new woman who was taking care of her granddaughter. She didn't know then what her ex-mother-in-law's love for her child, the only family she had left, would mean. "I'm not wearing that." Catherine threw her summer dress in Amanda's direction. "They'll make fun of me at school." Years passed. Catherine turned 15 and adolescence was in full force. By this time, she had won many competitions in cross-country skiing, received a sports category, and was enrolled in the School of Olympic Reserve. The school year was about to begin, and Amanda offered encouragement to update her closet. It was on the day Amanda was going to take her shopping that Catherine ruined her stepmother's morning coffee. "I'm an athlete, not a party girl," irritatedly said the girl now, running from one outlet to another. "But you're a girl. You have to look like one," Amanda answered her calmly. "You can't always wear tracksuits." "But I do play sports," Catherine countered. "But not all of you. You have to wear something to class, to lectures." "I'll see what other people wear, then I'll decide. But thank you for your concern." Catherine finished the conversation. Amanda sighed and followed the stubborn girl to the sportswear store. Buy new tracksuits. It was impossible to understand her stepdaughter. Sometimes she seemed to be good to her stepmother, and sometimes Amanda found that she continued to sneak around. It usually happened after some sort of spat. "I wonder what she'll come up with tomorrow," the woman thought curiously, waiting for the girl from the fitting room. "Will she put something in my coffee again? Will he delete my files in my laptop or throw out something worse?" But surprisingly, there were no consequences. Despite the disagreement at the store, the girl hadn't gotten back at her stepmother in any way. Amanda had really hoped that the simmering conflict would die down on its own when Catherine entered college and moved into the dormitory. But John insisted that his daughter stay at home. "I know what goes on in these dormitories," he said. "I don't want you wasting your time hanging out instead of studying." At that moment, Catherine and Amanda finally shared something in common: disappointed facial expressions. Both had hoped to see each other less often. "Oh well, I'll wait for her to get married," Amanda thought with bitter irony. The everyday life dragged on. Everything went on as usual. John often went on business trips. Amanda worked as a nurse. Catherine was at college until late in the evening. A phone call interrupted the routine, and in December, disaster struck. "We can't find your husband," Amanda got a call from the college that afternoon. "Your little girl has been seriously injured. She's in the emergency room." Amanda didn't remember taking off work and calling a cab. Despite everything, she loved this girl, even though she didn't reciprocate. She ran to the emergency room and learned that Catherine had a displaced tibia fracture and was being prepped for emergency surgery. "Do you need parental consent?" the woman asked the young doctor who admitted Catherine. "Her father is now in another city, and I did not adopt her. Can I give permission?" "It's okay," the doctor replied. "At 15, she can consent to surgery on her own." "Okay," Amanda said, confused. "So it's bad. What's the prognosis?" "I'm not an attending physician. I just examined her and referred her for surgery," the man replied. "Talk to a specialist later. All I can say is that this type of fracture is complex, and rehabilitation after it is very long. But she will not be disabled. She's an athlete." "Let's hope not," shrugged the doctor. "Understand, everything will be clear at the operation. Depends on how well the specialist will be able to assemble the bone. I really can neither scare nor reassure you." "It's fine now." "I'm sorry," Amanda said. "Wait until the surgery is over. The doctors will come out and tell you everything at once." The woman went to wait in the lobby of the clinic. She tried to call John, but he didn't pick up. Maybe he's in negotiations, Amanda thought, even though it had been hours already, and no one still couldn't reach him. How worried is he going to be, poor guy? I guess I can't understand these parental feelings. After all, it's not like I don't have kids. Her thoughts jumped to the unpleasant history of their attempts to have a child. Amanda and John had thought about it a couple of years ago, when their life together had settled down. They were in their early 30s, and the chances of having a baby were quite high. However, Amanda was not able to get pregnant. They had undergone numerous tests that showed the couple to be perfectly healthy. There are such cases, explained the fertility doctor. There may be something going on due to nervous tension, and the body doesn't want to get pregnant in a stressful situation of the stressors. Amanda could only remember her relationship with her stepdaughter. Otherwise, she and John had a calm, measured life without upheaval. And it appeared that, ironically, she was unable to have a child because of the presence of another child in her life. Her nervous thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was John. "Oh my God," he said, horrified to hear what had happened. "I'm on my way. I'll be there tomorrow. Take care of everything, please." The girl was operated on immediately. The doctor came out to Amanda and said he was satisfied with the result. Catherine was coming out of anesthesia, and the woman was told that she could visit her tomorrow. Amanda went home. It's unaccustomedly quiet here, she thought as she entered the house. Amanda went to the bedroom, and from her worry she powerlessly sank down on the bed and fell asleep. It was as if everything went well from there. Catherine was discharged, being warned that she would have a cast for at least 2 months. The girl was very upset because she missed classes and was basically very limited in movement. She sat at home, read a lot, and watched movies. "You look so downcast," Amanda said, looking at her daughter. "What do you want?" "She's very worried about not being able to play her favorite sport," John replied. "It's hard for her at her age to put up with so much. It's all about getting it right," John sighed. "I'm sure she'll catch up with her classmates." But Catherine was not so lucky. When it came to the point to remove the cast and begin the long rehabilitation process, it turned out that the bones are not properly healed, and there were symptoms of osteoporosis. The bone had become less dense and less strong, the doctor explained to John and Amanda. This can lead to new fractures, even from minor stresses. "What should we do?" John asked. His voice trembled. "Treat it. First, we have another operation as soon as possible, and then take special drugs to stimulate bone formation. The endocrinologist prescribes them." "That's good. Who do you recommend?" clarified the worried father. "I would recommend treatment abroad. There are good clinics in Germany, but it will be expensive, you understand." "We'll find the money," John replied calmly. They drove home depressed in Amanda's car. The woman was driving. John and Catherine sat in the back. The girl pressed herself against her father and cried quietly, realizing that it will not soon be able to take up skiing and generally return to the usual way of life. "I'll have to leave the school," finally raised her voice Catherine. "Let's not be in a hurry," John said soothingly, and held his daughter to himself. "Take a sabbatical for a year." Amanda was silent the whole way there and back. The woman sympathized with Catherine, but she had some very important news of her own that she didn't want to tell her family yet. What good fortune. What bad timing, Amanda thought in the bathroom this morning when she saw the 2 long-awaited stripes on the pregnancy test. No, the good news will have to wait after all. I have to deal with Catherine first. The woman decided and put the test back in the package, and then hid it in the pocket of her robe. And now, on her way home, she tried her best to hide her joy at finally becoming a mother. No matter how hard she tried to shift her focus to her stepdaughter's health, Amanda couldn't escape the thoughts of her future child. Boy or girl, she pondered. And how will they get along with Catherine? Won't she be jealous if she starts doing nasty things like she did to me? This is where Amanda started to get worried. And that's when she intercepted her stepdaughter's tense gaze in the rearview mirror. Amanda flinched. She was staring at her with unconcealed anger. The woman averted her eyes and gripped the steering wheel. She felt very scared. She had a premonition of something very bad. "I found a suitable clinic for Catherine in Germany," John said a few days later. "Now I will collect the money. The amount, of course, astronomical, more than 1,000,000 rubles. And this is only for the operation. And also rehabilitation." "What's all this money for?" Amanda was horrified. It includes not only surgery, but also tests, a consultation with an orthopedic traumatologist before the operation, and examination after the surgery. 3 days in the hospital, 6 days in a hotel. And transportation pick-up from the airport, take to the hospital, and then to the hotel. I see the woman sighed. At least afterward, when Catherine comes home, I'll be able to take care of her myself. I'm a nurse, so at least we'll save a little money. Why don't you want money from me? Catherine suddenly said rudely. There's plenty to spend it on. Amanda was taken aback. I just wanted to know what the money would be used for. So it's all inclusive, except for the food. That means there's money for that too. You're right, said John. I planned to borrow the whole amount from the director of my company and pay off part of her salary. John served the whole amount and made an appointment. The director agreed to give the money in a large advance, and John received it a few days later. I've never seen so much money, Amanda said as they spread the bills out on their bed to do an exact count. It should be enough for everything, both surgery and rehab. But I'll give you more if you need it, John said. Children are sacred. How do I tell him I'm pregnant? Amanda thought after he said that. Maybe I should wait until Catherine's surgery and then tell him the good news. They put the money in the nightstand in the bedroom and went to bed. In the morning, everyone went to work, leaving Catherine to pack. For the hospitalization, her grandmother Anne came over to help. All day Amanda was distracted. She barely worked her shift. Tired, she got in her car and drove home. The next day she felt worse, dizzy and nauseous. Could it be toxemia? Amanda thought. It's a little early. Maybe it's the age thing. I wouldn't drive today, in case she felt sick, so I'd call a cab. At work, she felt bad. She excused herself and went to see a gynecologist. Her eyes were blurry. Could Catherine have poisoned me with something? She had a terrible thought. No, she's not capable of serious harm. She can't do a little mischief, but she can't poison me. The doctor advised Amanda to drink plenty of water, to include fermented milk products and porridge in her diet, and prescribed magnesium and vitamin B6 supplements. Amanda drove home, wishing she could go to bed sooner. She felt weak and drowsy, but a nightmare awaited her at home. The money's gone. She was startled to see John at her doorstep. How? Catherine was home, and her grandmother Anne, who could have gotten in. They say they left to buy Catherine a backpack for the road. The old one was all worn out. But who could have known we had that kind of money at home? Only ours. Your principal. Amanda was thinking out loud. I'm shocked, to be honest, John admitted. We have to leave tomorrow. Everything's been arranged, and we don't have the money. Amanda went up to the second floor, went into the bedroom, and sat down on the bed at a loss. Her head was simply splitting. Her brain refused to recognize the reality of what was happening. She stared blankly at the nightstand where the money had been lying in the morning and didn't know how to comfort her husband. We found the money. She suddenly heard Anne's voice from downstairs. Amanda struggled to get up and walk downstairs. She was glad that the situation was resolved and wanted to know what had happened. She walked into the living room, and Anne said caustically, "Shame on you, thief." "What are you talking about?" Amanda asked, puzzled. "How could you steal money from a sick child?" Anne turned to her. "It's a good thing I thought to look in your car." "And we found the whole amount there," added Catherine, who was sitting next to her grandmother on the couch. John looked at his wife in silence with contempt. She did not know what to say, so absurd were these accusations. "She hid them in the trunk under a bag with some tools," said Anne. "I didn't expect that. You've lived together for so many years, and you? Why did you skip work today?" Catherine added. We're thinking where to hide the money? Were you looking for a safety deposit box? Or did you want to give it to your lover, but you didn't have time to take it out? What is this nonsense? Amanda finally found her voice. And how do you know I wasn't at work? I called you to see if you had an extra backpack. I had a doctor's appointment. You could have called my cell phone. Why would you call my cell phone at work? Catherine said. I don't understand what you're thinking about money. You didn't plan any of this? That wasn't the plan. Anne interrupted her. Maybe you planted it on me, suddenly realizing, turned to Catherine. Amanda, nice setup. Very skillfully thought out this time. Slipping money into my car. It's not like putting pepper in my coffee. You're an asshole, not a human being. The woman suddenly burst into tears. All these years we've been living, and you're ruining my life. So John roared. Shut up, and he turned on his wife. How dare you yell at my child, and a sick one at that? And how dare she accuse your wife of incomprehensible things? Amanda parried. Do you have some kind of double standard? Fuck you, suddenly bellowed her husband. You can't touch my daughter, you infertile fool. I have you for her. Wanted to ruin her life. Disrupt the operation urgently. Are you out of your mind? I would never in my life have started, was Amanda, but no one was listening to her. Get out, yelled John. I don't want to see you. I'll file for divorce as soon as I get back from Germany. And I'll be damned if I leave you any property. 2 months later, Amanda sat in her dorm room and calculated how much money she had left before her paycheck. The amount was not encouraging. She had to keep buying vitamin supplements. Pregnancy was harder on her than expected. And I don't have any savings, Amanda pondered. And nothing to sell. John took everything from me. He signed the house over to himself in the divorce with his lefty lawyers in the car, and even the gifts he gave me. Over the years, all my inexpensive jewelry. Only her parents knew about her pregnancy. She didn't have time to tell John at first, and afterward she didn't want to. She was too hurt by the way her ex-husband had treated her. Maybe you should tell him, after all, Margaret's mother exhorted the woman. I don't want to. The daughter shook her head negatively. My child doesn't need a father who threw his mother out on the street after 6 years of living together without much of a trial. Take my grandmother on Dad's side of the family. She split up with her husband because of him, too. He cheated on her. So she went to her house in a remote village and did not let him on the doorstep when he came to repent. And after that he lived as a hermit. So she took offense at the whole world. I remember that story, Mom. I only visited her a couple of times when I was a child, and after that she refused to accept everyone and got into herbs. She treated the locals, but for some reason she didn't want to know her family. Strange, isn't it? And her house is still intact. But no one goes there. When they buried her, they forgot the road. It's probably overgrown. But I'm not going to be a hermit, Amanda smiled. I have no grudges against the whole world, just one person. It was time for the first ultrasound. A few months ago, Amanda never imagined that she would have to go in for a checkup alone, without her loving husband, on such an important day. Her mom was back in town. She couldn't stay with her daughter. Amanda's father had had a stroke and the man needed to be cared for. So the baby is fine, the doctor who performed the ultrasound told Amanda. Do you want to know who it's going to be? Yes. Amanda opened her eyes in anticipation and smiled contentedly when she heard the answer. It had been a year. John had been working on his daughter's rehabilitation the whole time. The operation in Germany was successful, but the cast was not removed for a long time, and it took a long time to develop the leg after all this. However, despite all efforts, Mary limped, and her character from this did not improve at all. Why did fate do this to me, said the girl irritably to her father. I wanted to devote my life to sports. And what in the end? What am I to do now? To live and recover in time is how long has it been? Do you believe I'll miraculously heal and start skiing again? Look, but you can be more than just an athlete or a coach. There are different training programs, including for people with disabilities. What do you think I am? Handicapped? Catherine exclaimed with tears of anger in her eyes. No, that's not what I meant to say. John tried to calm his daughter. But she did not listen and went to her room. These conversations were happening more and more often, and they were devastating to the man. I was always on her side, he thought bitterly. So many years did not marry, took care of her feelings. Kicked the traitor Amanda out when I found out she was dirty. Now I live alone. Why doesn't she appreciate that? The young man was totally dependent on his daughter's whims. He reluctantly went home from work, because there he was waiting for a frowning-faced Catherine and her eternal dissatisfaction with complaints. He began to spend even more time on business trips, and in one of them met a nice woman, Amber. She worked as a waitress at the restaurant where he and his partners went for dinner. Where do you always go at night? After a month, my daughter suspected something was wrong. I go out with my friends. Not all I have to babysit you. John cut him off. In fact, he did not want to tell his daughter about his personal life, remembering her attitude to Amanda. The man offered Amber to move to his town, rented her an apartment the income allowed, and visited her several times a week. Amber accepted the status of secret lover. I don't care, she told her friend in a telephone conversation. Like a cheese and butter, I roll around. I don't have to work. I make eyes at him. I chase his legs, and he, sweetheart, is ready for anything. She laughed. You're lucky, she sighed enviously. I would have to find someone to provide me with everything. Maybe we'll get married. Amber continued to brag. I've been hinting at him, working him up, but he's afraid to introduce me to his daughter. According to his story, she's a very spoiled, capricious girl. But good luck to you, wished her friend. At least call me to the wedding. I'm sure you'll get what you want. But the plans of calculating Amber was not destined to materialize. However, it was only her own fault she missed socializing. Sitting alone in her apartment 24 hours a day, she got herself a lover, 20-year-old Michael from the neighboring entrance, who was constantly looking at the poor woman, who went shopping at the grocery store in a provocative short dress and stilettos. One day she lured him with her finger into the entryway, and he obediently followed her. You are my goddess, whispered the enchanted young man, lying in bed after his lovemaking. His admiration pleased her ego but let her guard down. One day she was kissing a young lover in the street near her driveway and didn't notice John pulling up in his car. He got out of the car and stood silently watching Amber and Michael embrace. Young man, he finally said snidely, let me help you pack up your beauty's things and take them outside. She's moving in with you now, I suppose. Amber and Michael looked away from each other, stunned. The woman realized it was pointless to make excuses in such a situation and, sighing, went to her entryway to say goodbye to her apartment and to pack up her belongings. What a fool, she thought frustratedly. Now to return home with nothing to eat. Emberochka, really, move in with me, Michael said, catching up with her on the stairs. Are you stupid? She answered rudely, opening the apartment. Milk on your lips has not dried up, and you're already climbing up skirts? Get out. And slammed the door in his face. The confused guy with the eyes of a hurt kitten remained standing in the stairwell, but Amber didn't care about him anymore. God, who have I messed with? John pondered as he walked home. It's from loneliness, apparently not recognizing a woman of easy virtue, he began to feel very sorry for himself. It felt like he was paying the price. But by an effort of will, the man restrained himself. At home, he was waiting for the second part of the play, which could be called a comedy of situations. But it was not a comedy, but a tragedy. Catherine met her father with hysterics. "I want to go to the sea," she declared, suddenly entering the living room, where the man sat down to rest from emotion. "Catherine is tired of sitting at home and going to doctors. Daughter, it is necessary to heal. Something cranky. We'll go on vacation in a couple of months, I promise." "Why not now? I'm tired. I want to swim. It's good for my leg." "Let's go this week," she demanded of her father. "Stop it," John shouted at her, his nerves finally giving out. First the mistress surprised him, then the daughter made demands. "Why are you yelling at me? Why are you acting like a little kid? You're an adult, but you're only doing things. You're sassing me. What do you want? You don't like me. Maybe your new baby will be better. Is that what you're counting on?" "What baby, for God's sake?" John waved her away. "I'm not having any kids. If you found out about Amber somehow, don't worry, I broke up with her." "Amber? Who the hell is Amber?" "I meant your Amanda. Did she have an abortion or something?" "I don't get it," John frowned. "Why are you bringing her up? And what does that have to do with the abortion?" "But she should have been in labor by now. Didn't you even ask if you had a son or a daughter? She was pregnant when she left here." It finally came to John. "I didn't know about it." "How did you know?" "I found a 2-stripe pregnancy test in her robe. She obviously didn't put someone else's in there." "Oh my God. So you really did go through her stuff all the time, just like she said. And I was a fool not to believe it." "Yes," Catherine smirked. "I got rid of her beautifully, didn't I? Our plan was a success." John silently looked at the monster, in which he could not recognize his daughter, and with horror waited for the continuation, although he was beginning to guess what she means. "Grandma Ann helped me," the girl said. "As soon as I found this test, I realized that you would soon abandon me. New wife, new offspring." Her tone became dismissive when it came to the baby. "So I got my grandmother to help me plant money for my stepmother. I could barely walk on my own." "How could you?" John exhaled in shock. "Grandmother broke quickly," boasted Catherine. "She has no one but me. She was already worried about me. And then I frightened her that you'll start a new family. You'd dump me, an invalid, on her. So it's about money." It turns out, looked at Catherine father. "In general, yes," she shamelessly confirmed. The man got up, left the living room and went to the second floor, not seeing the road. He came to his senses when he hit his toes on the banister, as if in a fog. Climbing the stairs, he went into his office, where there was a small bar, took out a bottle of cognac, a glass, sat down at his desk, and began to get methodically drunk. After a couple hours staggering, he went downstairs and hailed a cab. "Get me Amanda, who recently moved in," he demanded of the janitor at the hostel where his wife had lived before their marriage. "Amanda who?" "Go sleep it off," she scolded. "I'll call the police." "Nurse Amanda. She was supposed to move in here a year ago." "I know exactly who you're talking about. She moved out before she gave birth. Bought herself a house." "A house?" John was surprised. "Where did she get the money?" "You mean her ex-husband? The one who kicked her pregnant and penniless out of the house. She earned the money for the house. It was a very interesting story when she was 6 months pregnant." Amanda had lost her spirit. She went to work, returned to her dormitory in utter despondency. Didn't know where she was going to get the money to support her child. Her parents could not help. The father needed expensive medicines and physiotherapy. The woman didn't even think about returning to her hometown and creating additional expenses for her mother, for herself, and the child. "Can't do this anymore," she thought as Emily lay in her one room on an uncomfortably narrow bunk that made her back ache. I need a distraction, somewhere to get out so I don't spend a lot of money. And then the conversation with her mother about her reclusive grandmother popped into her head. Amanda was revitalized. It would be possible to go to that abandoned cottage, to walk away from the noisy city, to breathe the forest air. And in a few minutes she was on her way. The cabin was only 30 kilometers from the city. You could get to the nearest village by electric train, and then you had to walk a couple of kilometers through the forest. How overgrown is everything here, marveled the woman when she reached the place. And here my grandmother had medicinal herbs and a vegetable garden. She stepped inside the cabin. The shriveled door was unlocked. Inside was old furniture covered in dust. Amanda found a stool, laid a cellophane bag she had with her on it, and sat down to rest from the road. She was in a strange mood. How nice to go back to childhood for a little while, she thought. And how sad that I'm as lonely as my grandmother was. And then the woman's gaze fell on a puffy Soviet-era stationery book lying on a table nearby. She reached out, picked it up, and dust kicked up into the air. The recipes were written in the book in chemical pencil. I didn't know Grandma was into self-medication, Amanda marveled. She opened the book, and there were recipes for healing ointments and other remedies her grandmother had made. There were a good 100 of them, if not more. Leafing through the book, Amanda noticed a section called back pain. Interesting to try this, she thought. My back is hurting more and more every month. Late in the pregnancy, it's scary to think what will happen. I'll take this tome with me. At home, she prepared the ointment, having bought at the pharmacy those herbs that were in the recipe, and Vaseline as a base, tried to apply it to herself. And oh miracle! After 2 days, the pain in her back went away. The interested woman decided to try other recipes. Okay, let's try a hair mask. Amanda thought she was stressed because of her pregnancy and it caused a dull complexion. She decided to try the face mask because her skin looked terrible. The effect surprised not only her but also her co-workers. After a month, her skin was soft and her hair was smooth and shiny. Women at work flooded her with questions about what miracle remedy she was using. Amanda made them each a jar of her concoctions but didn't reveal the recipe. Word spread quickly, and soon she had a line of people lined up to receive the healing substances. We need to get someone to help, Amanda decided, and offered the job to the woman who lived closest to her. The same janitor who was now telling the story to John. I mostly just sit here, the older woman told the man. There's nothing to do at night, so I used to work part-time for your wife. And then she started selling goods through social media. It went well, and she moved into a small shop, opened it up and hired full-time help. John froze as he learned of his wife's fate. He had thought her a conniving liar until now, but it turned out that she was a capable businesswoman who started her own business without anyone's help. The child she gave birth, he inquired quietly. Yes, I can give you the address. You can talk to her yourself, the woman relented. Even though you have rattled her nerves. She was very fond of you at the time. John took the slip of paper with the address and thanked the woman profusely. Though he wanted to run to Amanda, he held back and went home, deciding he needed to get some sleep, sober up, and get himself back to normal. The next morning he showered, shaved, drank a few cups of coffee and drove his car to his ex-wife's house. The closer he got to her house, the more nervous he became. What will she say to me? How will she take it? He pondered. If I were her, I'd probably spit in her face. He drove up to the right house, hidden by a tall green fence, got out of the car and knocked on the gate. After a while it swung open. Amanda looked up at him with the baby in her arms. John stood silent, unable to find the right words. Come in, the woman said, moving aside and letting him pass. I just found out about everything. About the pregnancy, John pronounced, waiting for her to close the wicket. She looked at him carefully and nodded toward the open door. Come inside. I'll give you tea. I had no desire to inform you after everything that's happened, Amanda said calmly as she walked into the kitchen. Sit down, I'll put the kettle on now. And how is Catherine? Has she recovered? Not so good. 1 minute she's better, the next she's worse. Moody. Behavior is atrocious because of it. I'm not surprised, Amanda smiled, rocking the baby who flinched at the sound of the kettle boiling. She wasn't an angel in the good times either. But whatever she thought, I treated her well and worried about her health. And she did such an ungrateful thing. She confessed everything John said it was her and Anne who set you up. What was the point of that? Why so jealous of me and the baby? Amanda sighed. And that's him. You said baby, so is it a boy? A boy, the woman blurted out in a smile as she looked at her son. We're 4 months old soon. What did you name him? John held out his hands and Amanda gently handed the baby to him. Stepan Jonovich. Sound good. Tears came to the man's eyes. Sweetheart, can you forgive me? I was not myself because of my daughter's illness. I snapped at you. I believed everything. You know, with the baby coming, I've begun to understand you better, Amanda replied. I don't know how I would have coped if Stepashka had gotten sick. How would I have behaved? So you can forgive me, John repeated. The most important question for him right now. Amanda answered it. We'll see. 6 months later, they celebrated a birthday. The baby was a year old. There were few guests, only the closest ones. Amanda's parents came. Her father got better and was able to endure the road. Also present were John's father and Catherine and her grandmother. I can't help but admire your kindness, John whispered to Amanda, taking a moment when they were alone in the kitchen preparing to bring out the desserts for the holiday table. You've forgiven Catherine and her grandmother. I think they've realized what they've done and are truly remorseful. What's the big deal? Holding a grudge for the rest of your life. Especially now. After all, it was lucky to have such a sister as Catherine became. John smiled. Yes, she really cares for him. Who would have thought it? She's forgotten about sports. She wants to be a teacher. God grant us all wishes, said Amanda. I already have all my wishes, the man replied. I have a real strong family. All my loved ones are with me every day. They hugged each other and looked into the living room, where at the same table were gathered people who had made mistakes and were eager to correct them, who were angry with despair. But Emily arrived home to find her husband's mistress standing in front of her, and when she held out the document, "What a lovely day today," Emily exclaimed, putting on the table a sumptuous dish of roast duck. "I'm so glad we decided to have lunch with your brother today," Susan said, looking around the table and realizing that everything was in place. She clapped her hands together in satisfaction. A satisfied smile appeared on her face. Her dear, beloved husband, John, came over to her, put his arm around her waist and pulled her close. Emily felt a pleasant warmth on her back, turned around to face him and kissed him on the lips. It had been a full 3 years since they had known each other, and a full 5 months since their wedding day. Emily adored her husband, considered him the closest thing she had to a man. He was well-built, handsome, intelligent, the kind of man one could never find. Emily considered herself lucky. John's hands moved lower, gripping her thighs tighter. "Honey, not now. We have guests coming over," she said, laughing. John was still holding her in his arms, trying to reach her warm neck with his moist, cool lips. Emily kept dodging and laughing, enjoying the sudden game. But then the doorbell rang. Emily opened the door in front of her guests and saw her brother John on the doorstep. "This is Ashley." He introduced his girlfriend. Emily took a quick glance at the attractive woman with slender legs and a bushy mop of black hair. She was petite and fragile. The gray eyes and thin lips on her pale face spoke of a sensitive nature. "Nice to meet you. Come in," she said. Soon John appeared. He greeted the guests, shook his brother's hand, and glanced at Ashley, sizing her up. He kept his emotions to himself. "Let's get to the table," Emily broke the silence. "How did you two meet?" She cut off a piece of duck. The meat was very tender, sent a small piece into her mouth, and then looked up at Ashley, wanting to hear the story of their acquaintance. The girl was a little confused, taking a napkin to wet her lips. Michael beat her to it. Taking a sip of wine, he began to tell the story of their first meeting. Ashley was giving a seminar at our hospital. A very interesting topic, by the way. He picked up a golden potato with his fork. The effects of drugs on the human body. Emily raised her eyebrows, surprised at the topic his girlfriend had chosen. "Are you a medical professional too?" "I graduated from medical school," Ashley explained, lowering her gaze to her plate. After a second, she glanced at John, who kept his gaze on her. He was sitting diagonally, acting like an observer studying the object that caught his eye. "Did you know?" Emily interrogated her husband. The man, not understanding what she was talking about, interrogated his wife again. It turned out that John had fallen out of the conversation a little, immersed in thought. "Oh my. I did not know that the usual drugs can be real killers. It sounds fantastic." She was genuinely surprised. "Are you planning to get married?" "All you need to know," Michael replied cheerfully. Emily glanced over at Ashley. She replied that they were thinking about it. After a hearty dinner, it was time for hot tea and sweet dessert. "Be careful. There's a risk of swallowing your tongue, because this pie is so good," Emily said as she set a gorgeous strawberry pie with whipped cream on the table. "Did you make it yourself?" Michael wondered. "I got it from the bakery around the corner," she joked. The audience supported her with laughter. "Next week I'm going on a business trip to Germany," John's brother said. He explained that he was being sent on a training course, a long-time dream. There is nothing better than sharing experiences. His brother and his wife supported him. They congratulated Michael on this pleasant news. The dinner came to an end, and the guests, thanking for their hospitality, went home. "But do you think they'll make it?" Emily asked her husband John while putting the dishes in the dishwasher. He replied that they probably would, because they love each other, and you can see it on their faces. Emily finished cleaning up the kitchen, then wrapped her arms around John's neck and pressed herself against him. "I missed you so much," she said, kissing him on the lips. He kissed her back. They snuggled into each other, wrapping each other in an embrace. They walked through the hallway, ending up in a dark room. The deeper they went into it, the more the darkness engulfed them, hiding their silhouettes from view. Deep breathing was heard, the rustle of clothing. Emily was cleaning the house one day, checking the dust and putting things in their places. In the background, the television was playing a program about traveling. Suddenly, it stopped abruptly. There was a breaking news broadcast. The television announced that Flight RU-295 New York-Los Angeles had to make an unscheduled landing in Denver, the newscasters said. Emily knew that Michael was supposed to be on that flight. She immediately called her husband, telling him about it. John replied that he would call his brother back and find out what had happened. But after dialing his number, John heard only short beeps. A little while later, he got a call from Ashley. "Hello, John, hi. Did you call?" "Yes, Ashley, hi. I wanted to know what flight Michael was on." Emily said there was an emergency landing on TV on a flight to Los Angeles. "What? Emergency landing? What was the flight number?" the girl asked. John called out the numbers, and then Ashley breathed a sigh of relief. No. Luckily, Michael has a completely different flight number and he's fine. Don't worry. I just finished talking to him," she replied convincingly. John was in no hurry to end the conversation. Was there anything else? Ashley asked. No, I think it's all clear now, John replied and reluctantly said goodbye. In the evening, he returned home as usual. Emily was waiting for him there. She was happy to see her beloved husband again, asked about his mood, sat down at the table, poured tea into mugs. But suddenly she felt sick. It had happened to her before, and she knew it would pass soon. The thing was that Emily suffered from anemia, which was not well treated. She took daily vitamins to keep her healthy, but it had little effect on her daily life, except now. Only her doctor had warned her that with such a condition, she was unlikely to be able to bear and deliver a child. It made Emily sad, and she often brought it up, fearing that perhaps John wanted children, but with her around, it was unlikely he would ever be able to realize it. Is everything all right? John asked, gently holding his wife under her elbow and around her waist. A little more, and Emily stopped feeling dizzy. We should see another doctor, John suggested. Emily carefully lowered herself onto the cushioned seat. How long have you been seeing him? There's no improvement, and I think it's the opposite, her husband said. Well, don't say that. Dr. Valerie's a very good specialist, Emily said, and started dinner. John decided not to argue with her, knowing that Emily herself was very careful about her health. After dinner, the couple went to bed. The next day after work, John left the office, headed to his car, walking, trying to find the keys in his pocket as he walked. By chance, he noticed a familiar figure to his right. He stopped his gaze briefly and suddenly saw Ashley standing in front of him. She was leaning over the open hood, obviously trying to find the cause of the malfunction. John couldn't pass by without helping her figure it out. He went over to her and leaned over the hood. I don't understand what's wrong here, she asked rhetorically, placing her right hand on her hip. She knew someone had approached her, but looked up in surprise and exclaimed, Ah, John, how timely you are here. He answered, deliberately lingering his gaze on her eyes. I always show up at the right place at the right time. John then turned his attention back to the car and concluded that the car repairman was needed. Ashley sighed regretfully. Don't worry, I'll take you where you need to go, John said, easing Ashley's plight. Oh, I'd appreciate that, she said, tucking a strand of black hair behind her ear. John opened the door to his car and Ashley sat down happily. They drove in almost complete silence, occasionally exchanging a few words. John asked how Michael, who was now in Berlin, was doing. Ashley replied that he was happy to be there, that he was doing well, and that he was glad that he hadn't turned down the offer. I am very happy for him. I remember Michael always dreamed of being a doctor since he was a kid. And it looks like it's coming true, John concluded, glancing at Ashley. Soon they were in the driveway of the house. Ashley was carrying a heavy bag, and John offered to help her carry it upstairs. She agreed. A few minutes later, they were in a small but cozy apartment. Michael had purchased it a year ago, taking off his high-heeled shoes. Ashley walked to the kitchen and offered John something to drink. Without hearing his response, she pulled out 2 glasses and splashed some whiskey. John was a little discouraged by what was happening, because he wasn't going to stay long. But he couldn't refuse such a beautiful girl either. At that moment, Ashley was wearing a beige dress with black stripes that emphasized her slim figure. She went to the window, opened it, and then took out a cigarette and smoked. John had no idea that she could act so relaxed in company with Michael. She always gave the impression of a nice and proper girl. John stared at her, and at the orange flame that grew stronger with each new puff of Ashley's smoke. There was a fire burning inside John that he didn't want to let go. The girl inhaled the thick stream of smoke eagerly, opening her sensual lips slightly. Her languid gaze made John question his ability to keep his composure. This attractive, delicate girl with white skin, graceful neck, beautiful shoulders, and hips seemed the epitome of defiance. John walked over to the table, picked up his glass, and took a small sip. Ashley offered him a smoke as well. Everything happened in silence, as if they were both enjoying the atmosphere. John took the cigarette from her hands with his index finger and thumb and brought it to his lips. He did something he didn't usually do. He covered his mouth and let the smoke drift away, without taking his eyes off the girl. And John himself didn't notice that he was already kissing her. It was a blur, a fleeting loss of judgment. But what a sweet moment it was, full of feeling and passion. If it hadn't been for the phone call, John would hardly have been able to come to his senses. It was his wife, Emily. She was already waiting for her husband at home and told him that dinner had long since gone cold. "Don't worry, darling, I'll be there soon. I had to stay late for work." "I've been so busy, I forgot to call you," John said, looking at Ashley. She lifted the corners of her lips slightly. John found her smile charming, and he smiled back. "I'm on my way." "Kisses," he said, and then he hung up the phone, still looking at Ashley, realizing that he didn't want to break up with her at all. But if he did, he wasn't doing right by his wife. Just before he left the apartment, he stopped for a moment and looked at the girl who had stirred new feelings inside of him today. He knew that he should not continue with what had happened. So with just one last glance at the searing brunette, he walked out the door. When John returned home, his beloved wife met him here. She, as always, met him on the doorstep with a hug and a kiss. "I waited for you. Today you were delayed, not on a joke," she said. She looked tired. John answered her with the usual phrase, and then went into the kitchen, put some food on his plate, and sat down at the table. Emily was telling him about the day before, but John's thoughts were now directed in a completely different direction. He put his fork to his mouth, but he couldn't help but think about Ashley. She seemed so mysterious, so alluring and mysterious. He wanted to keep being around her, to unravel what lurked behind her appearance. He couldn't get rid of the image in front of his eyes, namely her gray eyes, lined with black pencil, her long eyelashes, and her open mouth. "John, are you here?" Emily interrogated him when she didn't get an answer to her question. "Did you ask something?" As if waking up, said her husband. "What did you do at work today?" Emily asked the question again. John shrugged his shoulders slightly, tilted his head to the left, and began to make up as he went along the flurry of activity he'd supposedly pulled off after hours. Emily stared at him, then yawned, blinking her eyes a few times and wiping away a tear. "I'm so sleepy already," she said. "Go to bed." Then John told her. "I want to wait for you," Emily said, resting her blonde head on his shoulder. At last they went to bed, and Emily complained to her husband again about her dizziness, then fell asleep. John, on the other hand, couldn't sleep for a long time. The next day, when he was at work, Emily called him and told him that she had been taken to the hospital. He jumped out of his chair in surprise. "What happened?" "Are you all right?" he asked. "I don't know. I passed out in the cafe and woke up in the hospital," Emily explained. "Honey, I'm on my way right now," John said, and leaving all his work and ordering his secretary to write down everything important, he went straight to the hospital. That day, Emily decided to meet an old friend at a cafe. Everything was fine at first. They were talking nicely, sharing things with each other. But at one point, Emily suddenly felt short of breath. She decided to get up to ask the waiter to turn on the air conditioner. But as soon as she did, her legs gave out and she collapsed to the floor. Her friend rushed to her, and the cafe staff called an ambulance. John paced the hallway in boredom. A nurse ran into him. "Calm down, man," answered him a girl whose low voice did not match her fragile appearance. "Your wife is fine. Ward 5. Come in, please," the nurse said, pointing to the door with her right hand. John literally flew in. Emily was lying there, covered by a sheet. When John saw her, he rushed to her bedside, knelt down, and took her palm in his hands. "Emily, my sweet love, how glad I am that you are well. When you called me, I was so frightened," said the husband, covering his wife's palms with kisses, pressing against her chest, looking into her eyes. "It's all over now. My good man, everything is over," she said, and closed her eyes. Tears came to her eyes. "Why are you crying?" John asked her. "I lost the baby," Emily whispered. She squeezed her eyes shut even tighter, trying to hold back the tears, but she couldn't and burst into tears. "What are you talking about?" John said, not believing his ears. He soothed his wife, stroking her shoulders and back. 5 days later, Emily was discharged home. The doctor recommended regular vitamin intake as well as scheduled IVs to keep her healthy. He also asked for bed rest and no excessive stress on the body. Emily was a little upset about her condition and the fact that she had to lead a sedentary lifestyle. Despite this, she took regular walks in the park and tried to be outdoors more. Sometimes, when John had a free moment, he would join her. Together they strolled leisurely along the narrow paths, admiring the perfect lawn and the view of the waterfront. Suddenly, John happened to see Ashley on his left. He was very happy to see her, but had to restrain himself in his wife's presence so as not to give himself away. He motioned for Emily to take a seat on the bench. The wife felt devastated. She realized that she needed to draw a resource from somewhere, to take strength to continue living life to the fullest. But the memory of the loss of her child each time brought her down into an abyss of sadness and melancholy. She understood that she had to be in the mood, she had to please her husband, but she just didn't have the strength to do it, and she didn't know where to get it from. Silently, she stared at her feet in her blue shoes, occasionally shifting her blank stare to passers-by. Meanwhile, John glanced discreetly to her left. There, behind a large tree trunk, she could be seen. Ashley was talking to a young man John didn't know. They were talking and laughing about something. And John suddenly felt an incipient jealousy building inside him. Why would he do that? And why would he do that? He has a wife. He loves her. What a man of property. Emily was silent, and John was silent. And he kept glancing over at Ashley. He secretly hoped she'd see him. It had been so long since they'd last seen each other. Then John's thoughts turned to Michael. How's he doing? I'd have to ask Ashley about that, he thought. Who's that? Ashley, Emily suddenly asked him. John pretended as if he didn't understand where she'd seen her or who she was talking about. It's not Ashley. You must be imagining it, John said for some reason. But Emily persisted and soon called Ashley's name. She turned around and waved at them with a big smile. Come here, Emily shouted to her. John, whose memory of kissing her was still fresh in his mind, got a little nervous, froze on the bench, and began to adjust his shirt. Ashley stepped closer to them, and Emily greeted her. Strangely enough, she acted perfectly calm, as if there was nothing between her and John at all. The man even thought for a moment that he might have been taking something too seriously that wasn't really worth worrying about at all. How are you doing? Tell me, how's Michael? Emily asked. Ashley was eager to talk about what was going on, about her life. Michael is doing well. He's learning. He's getting new knowledge. He likes everything. He promised to send me a picture, but he can't send it. He says he has no time, she said through laughter. Well done, boy. It's always been his dream, said Emily. I'm happy for him, too, Ashley said. Then she turned her gaze to John and looked him straight in the eye. He felt like she was seducing him right now with her pretty face. He felt his cheeks begin to burn, and he glanced furtively at Emily's wife. He tried to see if she suspected anything, but all his fears were in vain. Emily had her full attention on Ashley, who was a breath of fresh air to her. Yes, she lacked female companionship, and she needed the support of a woman. She even suggested to Ashley that they get together sometime to sit in a cafe. She said she'd be glad to, but she'd have to pick a free day. They talked for a while, and then Ashley said she had to go. John and Emily headed home as well. Evening had fallen. A cool air was descending on the town. It was pleasantly soothing and drowsy, making them want to go home and crawl under the warm blankets. That night, John couldn't sleep again. Thoughts of this girl, who was much braver than he had thought, would not leave him. The next day, when his workday was over and he was heading to his car, he heard a familiar hello. John stopped, looked in the direction the voice had come from, and was pleasantly surprised. But it really was Ashley in front of him. She was standing, leaning against her car. She was, as she always was, in a frilly pantsuit, slacks, and a blazer with a low-cut tank top underneath. She looked stylish and eye-catching. John looked around to make sure no one could see him. Then he slowly approached the girl, stood in front of her, and looked at her sharp chin, which she lifted up at that moment, presenting her thin, smooth neck to him. John was ready to put his lips to her soft skin right now, but he held himself back on purpose, realizing that it wasn't the right thing to do. "Should I give you a ride?" she asked, knowing the answer in advance. "I'd be willing to go to the end of the world with a nice driver," John answered her. The scent of her perfume reached his nostrils, and he reached for it. He almost touched her cheek, but Ashley dodged him. "Jump in the car, baby," she said rather defiantly. It made her future traveling companion even more excited. John was fully aware that his beloved wife was waiting for him at home. But he was drawn to this woman like a magnet. He literally couldn't help himself. She was truly full of life, full of passion and feelings that make us live and feel that we are alive. John didn't want to think about anything else that day. He wanted to savor the moment. He and Ashley went to the waterfront, where they spent a pleasant evening. The weather was surprisingly warm. It was wonderful to be outdoors. Ashley was having fun, laughing. Her laughter sounded so resonant, and it made John feel different from Emily, who had been feeling more and more depressed and sad lately. She took off her shoes and began to stroll down to the shore, each time gracefully drawing a line with her foot. John walked a little farther along, admiring her dance steps. Then she threw off her jacket, exposing her beautiful shoulders, and began to move them so sweetly and tantalizingly, as if she were deliberately teasing John. Finally, their walk ended, and they both ended up at the apartment where she lived with Michael. As soon as they entered, John pounced on Ashley and pinned her against the wall, running his fingers down her neck, traveling lower. Ashley waited for him to make the first move. The feelings overwhelmed them both. Trying to stop was futile. There seemed to be nothing better than the present moment. John was happy to drown in this passion, in these emotions, to inhale the scent of her skin, her hair, to touch her body and feel himself the happiest man in the world. After this encounter, filled with madness, John could no longer live as before. He began to look at his once beloved wife in a completely different way. She made breakfast and put it on the table. Emily refused to eat breakfast, citing a lack of appetite and a headache. If John had known how to help her, he would have done so. But the only thing he could do was to get his wife to see another doctor, who would get her back on her feet in no time, and they would forget about the constant apathy and lack of energy. That afternoon, John ate breakfast alone. Emily poured tea into a mug and went to her room. Her husband ate breakfast alone, but strangely enough, that's what he wanted now, to be alone with the memories of the woman who had colored his last night. After breakfast, John asked if Emily needed anything. "No, dear, thank you. I have everything." "You don't have to worry," she replied as she turned another page of the book she had spent most of her life in. The next time John met with Ashley, he unwittingly told her about what was going on in his family. She caught his pensive look and asked what was wrong. John replied that he was concerned about his wife's condition. "Yes, I've noticed too that Emily is a bit immersed in herself." "Is something troubling her?" Ashley asked so thoughtfully. Her voice was calm and gentle, and John decided to tell her everything. Ashley listened to him carefully and then said, "Yes, it's hard to live with a depressed person. Not only does he himself not know how to deal with it, he also surrounds his loved ones with the same mood." John said he himself began to feel a lack of desire to do anything. "I used to always be in a good mood, going to work, trying to do something for the family, to earn more, to fulfill the plan, or to get home faster. But now it's like I'm losing the point of it. I feel like Emily and I have become very distant from each other." "So what?" "She's not interested in me anymore. I feel like I can't help her. The only thing I can do is find a good doctor to get her out of this state of perpetual apathy and depression." Ashley was smoking a cigarette at this time. John was sitting on the edge of the bed, his legs covered by the blanket. Ashley lowered herself to the floor and held out the cigarette to him. Emily took a deep drag on the cigarette. You could hear the tobacco crackling as it burned. "You know, I have a good doctor," Ashley said in a confident voice. "He pulled my best friend out of a similar condition once. He knows what he's talking about." Her confident tone cheered John up a little. He even felt a little relieved at the thought of being able to help Emily. "I'll talk to him, and then I'll let you know when you and Emily can come see him," the brunette said, and took another drag on her cigarette. John looked at Ashley and envied his brother a little, because he had gotten the girl. When the husband got home, he talked to his wife about the new doctor. "He's been praised and recommended," he said. Emily sat on a kitchen chair. John stood behind her, telling her about the doctor and the treatment that was sure to help her. He massaged her neck and shoulders with his large, warm hands. After some thought, Emily agreed. She too wanted to return to a full life and improve her health. At the doctor's appointment, the middle-aged man asked a few questions. "Tell me, how long have you been having negative thoughts?" he asked. Emily sat in the chair, looking around the walls of the office, her gaze resting on a shelf of books. The office was spacious and bright. On William's doctor's desk were a row of elephant figurines, all with their trunks up. Emily counted 9 elephants, all of them different. "Why elephants?" Emily asked instead of answering. That confused the doctor a little. "Well, elephants bring happiness," was the first thing that came to his mind. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "Let us return to the subject of our conversation. I need to understand your condition so that I can give you the right treatment." Emily exhaled and began to tell him about the first signs of her ailment. The doctor listened attentively, making notes in his notebook. Emily watched him as she continued her story. William finally drew some conclusions for himself and then invited John into his office. He explained to both of them what tests needed to be taken. Emily felt overwhelmed. When she and her husband stepped out into the hallway, she turned to him. "Honey, I don't think we should do this. My doctor is doing fine. He knows me well." She was used to her doctor and didn't want to work with a new person. But her husband insisted, saying it would be for her own good. After some hesitation, she agreed. John put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close to him. She smiled back at him and reached up to kiss him. John was very glad that they did see a doctor and his wife agreed to be treated by another specialist. When the test results came back, John visited the doctor's office again, and the doctor gave him the medication that Emily was to take on a specific schedule. "Tell me, when can we expect to see improvement?" John asked. The doctor answered ambiguously and vaguely, saying that every body was different, and it would take time to know how fast the healing process would take place. John shook the doctor's hand, thanking him, and walked out the door. Emily greeted him with a smile. When he got home, she stood wrapped in blankets. She had spent the whole day in bed. "You can put the kettle on and sit down at the table. I ordered your favorite sushi," your husband said in an upbeat mood. "Oh, by the way, I went to the doctor today. He handed over your medication." Emily walked lazily into the kitchen. She had a bit of a headache. "Of course, since you've been in bed all day. Tomorrow your new treatment will begin. I'm sure it'll work out this time, honey," John said as he came out of the bathroom. Emily tried to stay in a good mood, even though she had been experiencing a lingering dull ache in her abdomen since morning. She decided not to tell her husband about it, so that she wouldn't upset him and start whining about her aches and pains. She sat down at the table. Soft, voluminous blanket enveloped the girl like a dense foam. She looked very cute in that outfit. Open-shouldered outfits suited her perfectly. Oh my gosh. Emily used to be cheerful, joyful, always full of life. John remembered the first time they'd met, when Emily had looked so confused, so defenseless, and that made her even more attractive. But now, when John looked at his wife, he didn't recognize her at all. The once cheerful person had turned into a creature with sad eyes that was impossible to look at without pity. John picked up one roll with his chopsticks and held it out to Emily. She laughed, but ate it. Their modest family dinner passed in silence, and then they went to bed. John thought about Ashley. It would be nice to meet her. How is she doing now? Michael should be here soon. Something's holding her up. Maybe it's for the best. John looked at his wife. She was lying on her back with her head turned to the left, sleeping soundly. John ran his hand over her shoulder, then turned to his right side and fell asleep. It wasn't long after Emily had started her new treatment. But strangely enough, she only got worse. She reported it to her husband. He was upset. They put his wife in the hospital. "I'm so worried that something might happen to her," John said when he met up with Ashley again. He was standing by the window. Ashley stepped closer, ran her palm along the line of his jacket, shook off the non-existent dust, and stared directly at his lips. "Understand, you're doing everything you can to help your wife. It's not like you can jump over your head. No one can. It's impossible," she said in a gentle, clear voice. "So stop torturing yourself in vain and let yourself rest after all." She looked into John's eyes, and he believed her, pressed his lips to hers, felt the tenderness of her lips, and sank as if in weightlessness. Ashley pulled off his jacket and slowly began to undo the buttons of his shirt. "You need to relax, trust me," she whispered. It seemed to John that Ashley was right, and there was nothing wrong with him spending another night with her. After all, Ashley had helped him, supported him through everything. Even found his wife's doctor. And John liked her as a woman. He couldn't stop her embrace, and he didn't want to. He wrapped his arms around her thighs, squeezed them tightly. Soon he didn't notice how he fell in love with this girl. He kept thinking about his brother, who was still abroad and didn't seem to be in any hurry to return. But John was only too glad for that. As long as Michael was in Germany, he could still go out with Ashley. One morning the man was getting ready for work. He was already running a little late, hurriedly tying his tie as he went. He'd had a little coffee, almost burned himself. Lately he'd been making his own breakfast, since Emily was still in bed indulging in sleep. John entered the room to say goodbye to her before leaving for work. But when he entered, he found his wife lying on the bed. Her right arm was down on the floor. She was lying in a rather unfamiliar position. Suddenly, John was overcome with panic. He was afraid that perhaps Emily wasn't well. And he was right. He ran over to her and checked her pulse first, slapping her cheeks, trying to bring her to her senses. John's whole body shook with fear. He rushed to the phone and dialed Ashley's number. "Stop being hysterical," she said in a voice that had a distinctly steely edge to it. "If she has a pulse, she's alive. I'll call an ambulance to take her back to the hospital. Calm down. I'm coming to you," she said, and then hung up. Ashley's eyes flashed with an evil light. She arrived at John's house very quickly indeed. The ambulance arrived at the same time. Emily was placed on a stretcher and taken to the hospital. Ashley walked over to John and looked into his eyes. "You don't have to be afraid of anything. It's going to be okay," she said so insistently and so confidently, wrapping her arms around John's face. There was fear in his eyes. "The doctors are doing everything they can." "I love you," the brunette added so suddenly that John didn't even know what to say to her. He was grateful to this girl for being there for him and helping him in every way possible. His breathing became more rapid. He was also staring into Ashley's gray eyes, which were literally penetrating him. "I love you, too," he said. Ashley's expression became emotional. Tears welled up in her eyes. Her lips stretched into a smile, and her whole face lit up with a strange light, completely baffling John. It was as if he didn't realize what he'd just said, or how his words had affected Ashley. She nestled her lips against his again. She did it as if they were the only two people in the world. "Let's go to the hospital and check in, and then we'll go to my place," she said. John agreed with her. They arrived at the hospital and asked the doctor about Emily's condition. They received a disappointing answer. William George said that Emily's illness had taken on a new form, and her condition had become more complicated. John wrapped his arms around his head. He didn't want to believe what the doctor was telling him. He was depressed. Words could not describe how he felt right now. John got up from his seat, walked out into the hallway, and began to walk from side to side, biting his fist. He did not want to accept the current state of affairs, because the treatment proposed by the doctor was supposed to improve his wife's condition. But in the end, the opposite had happened. And John felt guilty. He had insisted that Emily try the new treatment. Maybe he should have left things as they were, and none of this would be happening now. He berated himself for the mistake he'd made. His head throbbed as if someone inside it was trying to push the walls apart, pushing them harder and harder time after time. But Ashley came out into the hallway, joining him, wanting to hug him, but he wasn't ready for that right now. "I understand how you feel, but we don't have to give up," she said. Her words only made John feel worse. Ashley told him that the best thing to do now was to go home and get a good night's sleep. "There's not much you can do for your wife in your condition," Ashley pointed out. John listened to her again, and they drove to her house. "I neglected her. I betrayed her," the man said, sinking into guilt. "I shouldn't have done it. There's nothing I can do now. What a fool I am. What an idiot. She really loves me. She's faithful to me, and I left her in this state," John said, sitting back in his chair. The top 2 buttons of his dark blue shirt were undone. He was rubbing his chin and cheeks, which were covered with fine stubble. "What about me?" Ashley asked suddenly. "Don't my feelings for you count? My sincere love for you? Do you think that's just a bunch of empty words? How am I supposed to live with that?" She sank to the floor in front of him. John distracted himself from his self-destructive thoughts and looked at her. "You haven't thought about me at all, because I love you too. What am I supposed to do about it?" she asked him, her gaze demanding. Then she grabbed his hands and began to cover them with small kisses. "Are you going to leave me now? Will you leave me? Forget me?" Ashley asked jokingly, looking into his eyes. Ashley's eyes were desperate and bewildered. John took her hands in his. "Wait, that's not what I was going to say at all," he said, fearing to see the distress on Ashley's face. "But that's exactly what you're saying. You're saying you love your wife and regret getting involved with me. You're willing to abandon me when I need your support the most. God, how am I supposed to get through this?" Having said that, Ashley tried to go upstairs, but John held her back. "What are you talking about?" he interjected. His emotions went from self-recrimination to Ashley's depressed state. "Michael," she said barely audibly, putting a hand to her lips. "What's wrong with him?" John interjected with a frown. "I was going to tell you later, but what does it matter now?" "I got a call from the emergency services yesterday that Michael was missing," she said, turning toward the window. John lit a cigarette, probably trying to calm himself down. He too rose from his chair and hesitantly wanted to approach her, but stopped halfway. "Wait, but how did this happen? I mean, you said he was fine, and you talked on the phone regularly." He looked at her slender figure, clad in the black lace cardigan that suited her so well. "Yes, that's right. We've talked often, but there's been no messages from him in the last few days. I got worried, but I had no contacts to find out what was wrong with him. So I called the search service, through their channels. They found out that a certain Michael Alexandrovich had disappeared without a trace. That sounds strange. Where could he have disappeared?" John asked. Ashley, standing with her back to him and looking at her reflection in the window, took a deep drag on her cigarette smoke. "It's awful," she said in a shaky voice ready to turn to crying. John came over and put his arm around her. "But why didn't you tell me about it right away? The more time passes, the harder it is to find a person." He waited for a response. Ashley took her time answering. She smoked quietly, put out her cigarette, then turned to John. "I had too much on my plate at one point. I wasn't just thinking about myself, I was thinking about how to help his wife. I tried to handle it on my own, especially since you have your own worries. Your wife needs help, too. You didn't immediately hire a good doctor for her, did you?" Her voice took on a steely tone. It slightly confused and stunned John. He didn't understand what Ashley was getting at. "You know, I've been doing everything I can to make my wife better. But God knows, things took a different turn." John began to make excuses. Ashley decided to stop talking this time. Walking over to him, she put her arms around him. "You're all I have left," she said. John was overcome with guilt again. He realized that he had no right to leave Ashley alone right now. They spent that night together, comforting each other. The next day, after waiting for John to leave for work, Ashley went to run some errands. Before going out, she took a bath and picked out her clothes. She put on a beige suit, which looked stylish and not too revealing, and completed the look with earrings, a chain, and her favorite perfume. After assessing her reflection in the mirror, she left the apartment. Ashley knew exactly where she was going. Her cab stopped outside the hospital. She walked confidently toward the main entrance. Ashley didn't come here to see Emily. Almost at the end of the hallway, she turned right and opened a door with a sign that read Chief Medical Officer William George. "Oh, you, my dear. It's good to see you," he said, rising from his chair. It seemed he and Ashley had been acquainted for a long time and knew each other quite well. They exchanged welcoming kisses. "You look lovely, as always," the doctor commented on his guest's appearance. "I came to tell you that it's time for us to speed up the process. Don't you think so?" she asked the doctor. He spat in his chair, put his foot on his leg, and put his hands on the armrests. Definitely felt like a king. "Yeah, what do you suggest?" William George said playfully, taking out 2 small glasses and a bottle of white wine from the minibar. He poured just a little into the glasses and held one out to Ashley. "Let's at least drink to our meeting. It's so rare to see you anymore. I miss these moments," he said. Ashley looked at him and took a deep breath without answering. She remembered how he'd picked her up on the street when she was very young, given her shelter and food. Never tried to keep her close to him, but Ashley realized herself that she needed to stay close to him now. And only when she felt her own strength, expressed her desire to live independently and separately from him, she rented her own apartment and began to live again. Except she didn't know how to live any other way. Thanks to William George, she learned to seduce men, to fall in love with them, and then, having obtained the desired result, to part with them coldly and ruthlessly. The worst of it was that this man could give her everything but true love. Ashley, who had lived with him for 4 years, could not get rid of her consumerist attitude toward men. And now that she was on her own, she'd met them time after time and used them. They were all different, each good in his own way, young, interesting, promising just the kind of men this girl needed. She got to know them, fell in love with them, took what interested her, and then parted. This went on countless times, and there was no way this girl could stop. She did not know how to live differently, because she knew how to behave with the opposite sex only like this. Unfortunately, she was too uptight and closed to be real to them, and so she was only able to communicate with them superficially for her own benefit. Ashley was far from stupid and had caught herself thinking that more than once. But she was unable to change her behavior. It was more difficult than she had imagined. But despite this, there was always one person in her life to whom she could return at any moment, from whom she could ask for help, and who could take pity on her. That was William George, and this time she had come to ask for his help again. She needed to speed things up, for she could not wait long enough to avoid arousing unnecessary suspicion. "I need your help again," Ashley said, clutching the thin-stemmed glass in her hand. "What are you talking about?" The doctor asked her again. "You know what I mean," she replied. "You must remember that I am always ready to help you, because you are like a daughter to me," he said. He walked around the table, sat down on the countertop, and then, facing Ashley at a very close distance, allowed himself to cup her chin. This man loved to feel power over others, and especially this girl. William reached forward, wanting to touch her lips. "Give me what I ask of you first," Ashley replied, pulling his hand away. He looked at her for a moment, then stood up, walked over to the safe, opened it with a small key, and took out a tiny bottle. "Here you go, and don't forget your precautions," he said, sitting down on the edge of the table again and folding his hands on his knee. It was like he was waiting for Ashley to go a little softer on him, but she kept her distance. And they both felt it. When Ashley got home that evening, John was already here, having made them both a light dinner, and was glad to have Ashley to keep him company. She asked how his day at work had gone. John replied that things were holding steady. When both of them had satisfied their hunger, they were still in the kitchen talking about their various chores. "I brought some medicine. You should give it to Emily," she mumbled, immediately handing John a small vial. "What is it?" he asked. "Believe me, the glass contains something that will help your wife," Ashley said. "Where did you get it?" he asked again. "Money. It's not that important anymore. What's important is that we have something we can do for your wife," she said, not wanting to go into details. Ashley's words always had a surprising effect on John. Maybe it was the effect of falling in love. The day John had come to visit Emily, he'd done everything Ashley had told him to do. He piously believed that Ashley wished nothing but the best for him and his family. Pouring water into a glass, he opened the vial and poured its contents into the water. Emily's appearance left a lot to be desired. She was pale, her cheeks sunken. When she saw John, she tried to smile. Her lips were pale, chapped. "Emily, you need to drink this," John said. "The doctor said it would help you keep your body strong." "Thank you for your concern," she said in a weak voice. Her husband helped her up so she could take the medicine. Emily emptied the glass and looked into her husband's eyes again. She was sorry he had to see her in this condition. "Don't worry, I'll get better soon, and everything will be fine," she said. John ran his palm over her cheek. He was looking at his wife as if she were a different person now. "You're going to be all right," he said. Even though he said so, he could hardly believe it. For too long the doctors had been trying to cure her. But all their efforts were in vain. The disease had no intention of leaving its new home. Yes, John had lied. But what else could he tell her in this situation? A few days later, Emily got worse. The doctors were very tight-lipped, and one day they informed John that they had to transfer Emily to a hospice unit. He was shocked by the news. As always, Ashley was by his side, putting her hand on his shoulder. Both of them returned home. John was heartbroken. He didn't want his wife to end her life by passing away in the prime of life from some unknown disease. Ashley found something to say to him again. She talked and told him not to blame himself for anything, that he shouldn't forget about himself and his life as it was. You are young, you are handsome, you are full of vigor. You can't put an end to your life, she said. John sat on the couch, putting his elbows on his knees and covering his face with his palms. You don't have to put your hands down. You're not alone. You know you have me, she said, spreading his arms. Ashley climbed into his lap, wrapped her arms around his face, and looked into his eyes. You don't have to give up. Do you hear me? And I'll always be there for you, she said, and then nestled her lips against his. How did she do it? It remains a mystery, but as time went on, Emily stayed in the hospice. There she received the care she needed, no longer hoping for her recovery. Meanwhile, Ashley moved in with John. She was already feeling like a full-fledged mistress and was thinking about what kind of renovations she wanted to make to her room and telling John what kind of kitchen she wanted to replace her old one. He saw Ashley's happy eyes, and it seemed to him that this was the way it should be. Soon she started talking about getting married. More and more changes were happening in John's life. He couldn't figure out if he was going in the right direction. Ashley, on the other hand, was persistent. Unlike him, she knew exactly what she wanted. Once, while John was watching TV on the couch, she sat next to him and stroked his hands. John responded by stroking her hands. Finally, when Ashley had his attention, she said, looking at the ring finger of her hand, "How nice an engagement ring would look here. Don't you think so?" she asked, looking at John. "Yes, any jewelry would look lovely on your beautiful, delicate hands," John pointed out. "No, you don't understand. I want a wedding band," Ashley said flatly. "Are you serious?" John clarified. "What do you think? You and I have been living together under the same roof for so long, and you still wonder if we're serious about each other?" Ashley asked him. "Well, yeah, I agree with you, you're right. But how can we get married when my wife thinks I'm still in love with her?" John suddenly objected. Ashley looked at him reproachfully. "How can you say that? Look, you're not only hurting your feelings right now, you're hurting mine too. I'm living with you. I'm hoping for something, making plans, dreaming about our children. Life goes on. I'm not getting any younger. Are you ready to wait and stall for time? You've upset me too." "I didn't expect this from you," Ashley said. "I was sure that you really loved me and that you were ready to start a family with me. But then all of our meetings and hugs and kisses weren't real. Was it?" At that question, Ashley jumped to her feet and looked at John as if he'd just betrayed her. "I guess you're saying that you never loved me, and everything that happened between us was just a lie, a pathetic game you made up. Tell me the truth," Ashley screamed. "Are you really crazy?" "No, not at all," John said, trying to even things out. "Why would you think that? Calm down, please. I'm not with you for a game, believe me, really. I really like you. I have feelings for you. And of course, I'd like to marry you." "Oh, for God's sake. Marry me," John suddenly said, getting down on one knee and taking out the ring he wanted to give her for her birthday. "I'm sorry I wanted to do this a little later, but I'm very happy that you're going to be my wife. I really am," he said. and in that moment he was probably sincere. After all, he wasn't going to hurt Ashley, and he was ready to take her as his wife. "Oh my God, John, this is so sudden," she suddenly exclaimed, delighted. She put her hands to her mouth like a child, as if she were afraid to frighten away the sudden happiness. What joy! "I'm so happy. At last we will be able to legalize our relationship and not hide," she said. Soon they signed and celebrated this festive celebration in a cafe with friends. Ashley was glowing with happiness. The guests congratulated the newlyweds. John felt a little awkward, but still, hearing the approving congratulations of the guests, was happy about it. "John, you're doing great. Congratulations. How is Emily?" one of his friends asked him. He replied that everything was the same with her. The groom tried to avoid these questions. After the celebration, family life settled down to a moderate pace. John was still working, visiting Emily in hospice on his free days. She rarely spoke to him and slept more and more. John, when visiting her, could not tell her that he had remarried. Before entering the room, he took off his wedding ring, which was wide and different from the ring Emily had once put on his finger. To be honest, John sighed with relief when he saw Emily asleep. In front of her, he felt a kind of shame for what he'd done. But now he was back home. Today was a day off, and Ashley was looking forward to seeing John. She had a surprise for him, and when he sat down at the table, she pulled out a small box. John looked at everything going on with interest in his eyes. "Well, don't you want to open it?" she uttered, looking intently into his eyes. He smiled and replied that of course he wanted to. He took off the top pink cardboard lid and saw a beige napkin inside, on which was a soft bear cub the size of a small ball, and next to it a smooth paper strip. "What is it?" John wondered. He grinned and looked at Ashley again. "You and I are having a baby," she said, and stepped a little closer to John, taking his hands in hers and placing them on his lower abdomen. "Can you feel that our baby is here?" She bared her white teeth. John could hardly believe it. But it was true, and he would soon be a father. God, this was what he had dreamed of for so long. With Emily, they'd tried to have kids, but it hadn't worked out. But with Ashley, it was different. He was about to become a father. Ashley walked down the hallway past John's office. It was a small cubbyhole where he used to crawl in alone, thinking about something or talking on the phone. The door was ajar, and Ashley saw him. He was sitting at the table. He had a rather pensive look on his face. His eyes were staring straight ahead. John was definitely not here right now. He held a glass of whiskey in his left hand, squeezed the right corner of his mouth, then emptied the glass. John was distracted from his heavy musings by Ashley, who had just entered the office. Catching her husband's gaze, she smiled. He pulled a smile onto his face as well. He didn't want her to see him sad for anyone. And he had someone to be sad about. He thought of Emily, of leaving her, of stopping fighting with her, and it made him feel hard. "Honey, could you give me a few minutes?" Ashley spoke. She was holding some paperwork. "I had a checkup at the doctor's office. We want the baby to be born healthy, right?" She fixed John's hair. "Of course, my love," her husband answered her, closing his eyes. "You know, I put your name as my proxy. Sign here, please," she whispered in a soft voice. John, without a second thought, took the pen and, without reading anything, signed his name in the lower right-hand corner. "Thank you, my good man." Ashley leaned over to kiss him. "Are you going to bed, or are you going to stay here a while?" she asked, tucking the papers behind her back. He replied that he would stay a little longer and he would join her in bed. "I'm waiting for you," the mother to be added and left for her room. Ashley put the papers in her bag, then undressed and lay in bed. Her eyes were open. She wasn't going to sleep. She waited for John to come in, But he was in no hurry. He poured the whiskey again, emptied the glass again. He was not feeling well, to say the least. It would seem a happy new wife, a child in the future. But no peace of mind. And he knew it very well himself. He thought about his ex-wife and how she had stopped recognizing him. She'd gotten really bad. John tried to think about the present, about what he had now, but his thoughts kept coming back to Emily. While he was enjoying his new family life, she was slowly fading away, day by day. The next morning, a young doctor entered Emily's room. He was taller than average, had blonde hair and an equally blonde, close-cropped beard. He had started working at the hospice only a week ago. Before that, he had worked in a neighboring town in a polyclinic. However, writing his doctoral thesis forced him to transfer to the hospice for necessary observations. This young doctor naturally had an inquisitive mind. Moreover, he was very quick and qualitative in this direction, from which he was quickly liked by the entire medical staff. The doctor carefully examined the patient, wrote something down in his notebook. His eyes were focused. He glanced again at the patient, whose face had a horrible hue. Vaguely, he recalled how they were taught what to do in cases like this. A line below it, he wrote down the tests he intended to take from this woman. I was about to leave when suddenly I heard a very soft voice. "Wait, stay with me for a while." Emily did not open her eyes, but she knew that someone was with her. She was already so weak that at times consciousness came back to her, and a great sadness and pain came over her at being here. It had been a very long time since she had seen John, but she didn't blame him for that. She realized that there was nothing he could do about her being so sick. It was only the sadness of that realization that filled her soul. "I'm here," the doctor answered. Emily struggled to open her eyes. It seemed to be the first time she had seen this face. "What is your name?" she asked. "My name is Michael George." "Michael to you," he said. "I'll need to run some new tests on you to see what's going on." "Go ahead, doctor, I don't care anymore." "I already know there's only one end," she said with difficulty. The doctor did not answer her. He understood that her condition was grave, but something was definitely confusing him. And the practice he had under his belt told him that this woman might have been misdiagnosed. But when he took all the necessary biomaterials and analyzed them, his hunch was confirmed, and he immediately started the treatment according to the new scheme. And one day when he came to visit Emily, she was already waiting for him. She was still lying in bed, unable to get up. Even so, her mind was clearer. "Good morning," she greeted the doctor. He answered her in the same way. His lips turned up in a smile. "You're in a good mood, I see," he asked as he came closer. As he had all the previous days, the doctor checked her pulse and blood pressure, felt her lymph nodes, and drew blood. Emily held his gaze. "How do I know?" "Your face is very familiar to me," she said suddenly. Michael looked intently into her eyes. "Yes, that's right. I've definitely seen you somewhere before," she said, "but I can't remember where." The long stay in oblivion had weakened her memory a little. "Unfortunately, I can't help you with that. Maybe when you're feeling a little better, you can solve this riddle," Michael replied casually. Suddenly the phrase, "you're asking the riddle," came to Emily's mind. It had been uttered then by the blonde-haired guy in the family circle. Emily's brain went through one picture after another. Things were getting a little confusing. She tried to focus. There were young people in front of her eyes, a blonde, a brunette, and some other man. That's right. There was her husband John and that young Dr. Michael. But how did he end up there with them? "Tell me, do you have any family? Maybe brothers or sisters?" "I remember something, but I'm not sure," Emily said. "Really? What is it?" Michael grinned. Emily strained again to try to recreate the picture better. But alas. "I have to admit, I'm the one who had the misfortune to lose his memory," Michael said. that left Emily stunned. "What do you mean, lost your memory?" she questioned. Michael wanted to tell her, but at that moment a nurse entered the room and called out to him. "We'll talk about this later, okay?" Michael said, distracted. "Yes, of course," Emily said, smiling at him. The nurse who had called Michael looked at Emily strangely and closed the door without saying anything. The nurse told Michael to go to the head doctor's office. Michael knocked on the office, and after answering, he entered. "Have a seat, Michael," said the chief physician. His name was Ben Anderson. "Yesterday I wanted to ask about a patient named Emily Johnson." He looked at the doctor carefully. "I must say, you've made great strides. And as cynical as it sounds, I'm glad you lost your memory." Once Ben laughed and prepared to listen to Michael's answer. "Yes, sometimes we don't know where fate will take us," he answered. "But what I'm wondering is, under what circumstances did this woman come to our hospice? Didn't the other doctors find the real cause of her illness? The strange thing is that the mobility of red blood cells, which had been reduced, became normal again, and the shape began to return to its original form. You, Ben, as a specialist with vast experience, you know that this occurs only in 2 cases. The first we immediately dismiss, and then we're left with a well-known clotting agent." "But I don't understand your thinking," Ben Anderson interrupted him. "Where are you going with this?" Michael was in no hurry to answer. Something told him it was too early to say it out loud. Michael carefully monitored Emily and visited her every day. Despite the serious condition from which she had recovered and stabilized, she was still a person who loved life and had a kind heart toward people. "Tell me, why doesn't anyone visit you?" he once asked. When he said it, Michael regretted it. His words might have hurt her. She thought for a moment and replied that she didn't know why. "I guess it's too hard for my husband to see me like this. Frankly, I've lost track of time. I can't tell you the last time he was here. Maybe a week ago, maybe a month. But I don't blame him. John was with me every day before I got here. He did everything he could to help me. I'm grateful for that. After all, if I hadn't gotten here, I wouldn't have met you, and my recovery wouldn't have begun. And yet your face looks familiar to me," she repeated, scrutinizing Michael. He squinted, as if trying to see something that had come to him. "As you said, your husband's name is John?" he asked, and seemed to sink further into the past, recognizing himself anew. She nodded, adding that John had a brother. After saying the last word, Emily fell silent. Finally, they looked into each other's faces. It seemed as if something important was about to be revealed. But the door to the room opened again, and Michael was urgently invited into the next room. Emily was left with the persistent feeling that she knew this man for sure and had seen him before. Eventually, she came to the conclusion that this young doctor just looked a lot like Michael, her husband's brother. Same blonde hair, and even his facial expressions were similar, but something was still different. And so far, Emily couldn't figure out exactly what it was that made her think that. On one hand, she seemed to be socializing with Michael, but on the other hand, looking at his face, he was very different from the Michael she had once known. Time went by and Emily was getting better and better each day. Emily could feel new strength literally being added to her. She could feel the blood in her veins developing throughout her body and filling it with warmth. She felt again that she could start doing something next time. When Michael came to see her, she asked him if he could purchase some thread and a hook for her. She had wanted to crochet a backpack for herself for a long time, but had put it off every time. Now she felt that she could crochet it in just a couple of days, and she wanted to make it happen. "Look, you're almost completely healthy," her doctor said. And it was true. She had even been moved to another ward because she no longer fit the parameters of a hopelessly ill person. "Don't you want to call your husband? After all, you are no longer without strength. You can talk to him about something," Michael suggested to her. But when he saw Emily's saddened look, he realized that it wasn't that simple. I called him, but his phone was always out of range. I don't know what to think. Maybe he left town altogether. Emily said, a little confused. Yeah, that's a little strange. How could a loving husband leave his wife in the hospital and not even be interested in her condition? Michael asked the question aloud and regretted it again. He realized that this topic would hurt his ward. Are you married? Emily asked him in response. She again stumped him because the doctor could not remember the details of his personal life. That's how memory peculiarities work. Michael remembered the names of medications perfectly and was proficient in various therapies. But simple memories from everyday life could not be uncovered. And then Michael had an idea. He asked if Emily remembered the address of the house, and Emily clearly replied that yes, of course she did. Michael then suggested that they go to her house together so that she could visit her husband and find out why he had disappeared from her sight. Emily liked the idea very much. It came as a pleasant surprise to her, and that afternoon at lunchtime they drove to the address. The car slowly parked in the yard. Emily stepped outside and looked around the high-rise building. She was a little nervous because she couldn't know in advance what to expect. Michael got out of the car and offered to go up with her, but Emily declined, saying that she could handle it on her own. He agreed. Emily slowly began to climb up the stairs. Her heart raced with each step up the stairs. When she reached the familiar door with the two numbers 2 and 7 attached to it, she pressed the bell and was ushered in. She pressed the bell and licked her lips in anticipation. She mouthed to herself several times the words she would say to her husband when she met him. All those memories and the days she'd spent with John came vividly back to her mind. She held no grudge against him, but she wanted only one thing: to see him, to talk to him about everything. There was so much she wanted to tell him. She took a breath in and out and pressed the bell, then adjusted her collar and ran her hand through her hair a couple times. Finally, footsteps were heard outside the door, and the next moment the door opened. Instead of John's expected face, Emily saw before her the girl who had been present in her memories. Emily remembered that this was John's brother's girlfriend, so she smiled at her. "Hi, can I come in?" Emily asked, and her voice sounded unsure. The lady who'd opened the door for her wasn't exactly welcoming. She gave her a scornful look and, without saying a word, wanted to close the door in Emily's face. But she had the courage to hold on to the handle. "Ashley, I don't understand you. What's going on?" "I can't go into my own house?" she asked again. "What do you want here?" "This is already my apartment," the new landlady shocked Emily with her words. She grinned, asking if she was joking. After all, Emily hadn't gotten anything wrong. Emily was sure this was her apartment. "Liz, you must be confused about something. It's me, Emily, John's wife. And he's home right now. I need to talk to him." Saying that, she pushed Ashley away and entered the apartment. The latter realized that she would have to make an effort before this fool would realize that she was no one else here. Emily entered the apartment, looking in every room, wanting to find John, but he was nowhere to be found. "What's going on here? Where is John? What's wrong with him?" demandingly asked the guest. "And that's none of your business," Ashley replied rudely. She realized she wasn't going to get rid of her that easily. But the insolent lady had a trump card in her hand. Without a second thought, Ashley went to the closet, pulled out a file folder, threw it on the table, and unfolded it in front of Emily on the right page. "Here, look, everything you wanted to know is printed in black letters in white. Read as much as you can." Saying this, she stepped back a little, crossing her arms over her chest. Emily began to cursorily study the documents with her eyes. The more she read each line, the more horrified she became by the minute. Her eyes rounded. She really didn't know what to say to that. "But how did this happen?" she asked, raising her eyes to Ashley. She silently held out her right hand in front of her. A ring sparkled on her ring finger. "That's not true." "You're lying," Emily said in a raised voice, wishing it was all a lie. "I did call John, didn't I? His phone was off exactly the same as yours." Emily spoke the last words slowly, as if she'd just realized what was wrong. "Did you really set this whole thing up?" Emily questioned. But it was probably rhetorical. Ashley wasn't going to answer her at all. "I don't have to explain anything to you. Whatever you need, I've answered it. I've shown you the documents. Now, if you would be so kind as to leave my apartment." Ashley mumbled and walked to the door, opening it to get Emily out as quickly as possible. But as soon as she opened the door, she was immediately confronted by John. Her surprise took her breath away. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came to mind. But John, seeing his ex-wife behind her, who was standing on her own 2 feet and looking fine, was taken aback. "Emily," he said her name as if he hadn't expected it. Emily looked up at him and her eyes involuntarily began to fill with tears. John immediately took a few steps toward her, wanting to hug her, but Emily pulled back for some reason. "Emily, I'll explain everything to you. I was told you were transferred to another facility. I looked for you, but no one could figure out what I was asking of them. I can't believe it. You've recovered." He spoke the words. Emily listened to him, not knowing what to say back, as if it was too late to try to clarify anything now. "Oh God, Emily. Oh God, I'm so sorry," John was saying. Then suddenly he threw himself at her feet. Emily was completely confused. She didn't know what was happening. How could she be so abruptly left without everything? But at the same time, she couldn't see her husband, whom she still loved, suffer. "You weakling," Ashley pronounced. She did not recognize the manifestation of human feeling. She believed and was firmly convinced that it was merely a manifestation of weakness of character. Emily told John that she had tried to let him know about her health, but his phone had been off the whole time. John gave her a surprised look, because he was the one who had been calling Emily, and her phone was always busy. He immediately pulled it out and called his ex-wife again. As stated earlier, the answering machine answered. John then went into his phone settings and discovered that someone had blacklisted Emily's phone and had also set a call barring on that number. The first thing John did was turn to Ashley and gave her a questioning stare. She stood there with a nonchalant look. She masterfully kept her mask on, trying not to give herself away. "Okay, John, it doesn't make any sense now," Emily said. "You have a whole new life now, a new wife, a new family. You've even managed to sign the apartment over to her. I'm going to leave, no matter how much you cry here. It's all the same. John's long since fallen out of love with her and started a new life." "What are you talking about?" "I didn't rewrite anything to anyone," the man protested. Emily told him that the document said otherwise, and then asked Ashley to show him the new property certificate again. He didn't believe her, and when he saw the folder of documents in his current wife's hands, he asked to see them. "What a fool you are," she said, grinning. This surprised John even more, who had never seen Ashley in such a role before. "Here. You can watch as long as you want, can't you?" she said mockingly. John took the folder, found the necessary documents, and indeed found there a certificate that his apartment belonged to her. Next, he found another document with his signature on it. The man remembered the day when he was drunk and Ashley had approached him asking him to sign as a trustee. She had said at the time that it was being asked for at the women's health clinic. And then it hit John, it turns out there was no baby in question. And Ashley set this whole thing up just to get a new resource. "Why don't you tell me why you did it?" John asked her. His eyes were filled with horror and indignation. Ashley was starting to get angry. She didn't like being asked to justify herself. It had been a habit ever since she'd been living with William George. He always asked her to account for herself, and often punished her severely. When she tried to lie to him, he was about to call the police to have them both thrown out the door. But at that very moment the doorbell rang, and since the door was unlocked, The guests didn't wait for their hosts to arrive. Michael appeared on the doorstep, and he wasn't alone, he was with the police. Ashley realized there was no escape. How could it be? She miscalculated. She was sure that on the day Michael was supposed to take the plane to Germany, she had put a substance in his coffee in the morning that would cause spontaneity and fainting. She didn't spare the substance then and poured a lot of it in. Michael had breakfast, drank coffee, and only at the airport he began to feel unwell. He felt dizzy and began to see people who didn't exist. He felt nauseous and went to the toilet. That's where he lost consciousness. He was found only a few hours later. By that time, the plane had long since landed in another country, completely forgetting about the security guard. The police chose to keep silent about the fact that he remained alive. There have been many times crimes of this nature in the city, and the police decided to bring this case to the end and find the culprit, who every time acts according to the same scenario and always gets away with it. Michael remembered everything perfectly. He remembered Ashley, and that he had a brother John and a wife Emily. In order for him to work and not be too conspicuous, he was placed in hospice care where he met Emily. How hard it was for him to keep himself in check so he wouldn't give himself away. The police tried to work on his appearance to make it less recognizable. Special inserts on the movable eyelid and a false chin with a beard and mustache had done the trick. That's why Emily couldn't figure out who was standing in front of her. The police were careful not to spook Ashley. And when Emily and Michael went to her house, the police were already there. And there was nowhere for the perpetrator to go. Ashley was handcuffed and taken to the station. She was not going to be responsible for this alone, and that's why she told everything about William George. But he was more cunning and managed to escape abroad. John and Emily Johnson talked about a lot of things. They had a lot to discuss, found the strength to forgive each other and start living again. And as for Michael, he continued his work as a doctor, putting in his piggy bank of experience one more unique case.